Okay, good evening to you all. I'm going to call our meeting to order, and as most all of you know, this is our work session, which we have at the basically the last Thursday in each month. Tonight we'll dispense with some of our preliminary introductions and go right into our agenda. Tonight's not a business meeting, so we probably won't be voting on many things, but we will be sharing information. So thank you all for being here. Look forward to hearing from probably most of you this evening. Madam Clerk, if you will call the roll at this time, I'd appreciate that.
Mayor Marshburn.
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Vance.
Present.
Councilmember Behringer. Here. Councilmember Dellinger.
Here.
Councilmember Matthews.
Here.
Councilmember Singleton.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Council. Item is the adoption of the agenda. You have that before you there, so I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So move. Second.
Okay, motion properly made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, there is no opposition. We have adopted the agenda. Thank you very much. All right, we'll now go to a discussion of various reports, and we will start with benefits renewal kickoff. And Mr. Seckler, our HR director, is here tonight to share information, and all of you should have some information at the dais there, I believe. So, and you will introduce our guest tonight, right? I believe we've had him before.
I
Yes.
sure will. Good
Okay.
evening to you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you,
evening.
as always, for your time. Before I get started, Mr. Paul Sidor is here from IBA, our benefits broker. Our goal tonight, as we do annually, is to share with you our plans for our annual benefits renewal. As you know, we work almost constantly now, year-round, on our benefits renewal. But once we get to the January timeframe is when we really start working in earnest and plan for our renewal, for our open enrollment in May, for all of our new benefits elections that staff members make to become effective on July 1st, the first day of the new fiscal year. So we're going to walk through with you some updates, share with you some of the plans that we have for this year's renewal period, obviously obtain your feedback, and then talk about the schedule as we move forward towards open enrollment and then our July 1 implementation. First thing I want to share with you, we are currently working with the town manager, Paul and I, with regards to reviewing the viability of a self-funded insurance model for our health care. That is something that we have looked at for the last several years, and we continue to look at it in greater detail and in greater earnest with regards to our benefits program. So that will be something that we'll continue to look at this year. We're also considering the continued relationship that we have with Aetna. Aetna has been our health partner now for 4 years, and it's been a pretty positive relationship, and we've got some information to show you about that relationship that we've had with them. We are continuing to use something that we've come to term a reward mechanism for our staff to receive 100% funding on their medical premiums. We are using a health assessment questionnaire. We have done this now for 2 years. This is the 3rd year that we've done that. And all of our staff members and all of you that participate in our health plan complete that questionnaire. And then as a result of that, the reward that is given for completing the questionnaire is the 100% monthly premium that is paid on our staff-only premiums each month. And we're continuing to use the dual option of the high and low plan deductibles. This was something that we implemented several years ago. We implemented an opportunity for our staff to make some decisions with regards to the risk that they wanted to take. A little bit higher premium, a little bit lower risk relative to any serious health conditions that they may encounter, or possibly paying a little bit lower in premiums, but possibly taking on a little bit more risk if there was a serious medical condition. So we're going to continue to give staff the option of how they want to proceed with regards to that. I alluded to this a moment ago, and I'm going to step aside and let Paul talk about this a little bit, but this is a little bit of trending with regards to our healthcare costs and the relationship that we've had to date with Aetna.
Well, thank you, BD.
Mr. Sador, if I meant to mention that to BD, if you're comfortable in letting down your mask, feel free to do that. If you'd prefer to keep it up, that's fine. Sometimes we have speakers, it's a little hard to hear them, but we probably won't have that difficulty with you, so it's your choice, sir.
Oh, well, thank you. And good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm Paul Sider from Independent Benefit Advisors. We've had the pleasure of working for the town since 2010. On the screen are some the data about the performance of the health insurance plan since 2015 to present. And then when I say present, you'll notice at the bottom of the chart that there is a considerable time lag between the current date, January 2022, and the data that we have on the hard copy, which is September 2021. That's just by the nature of the health insurance claims and the way the insurance works. Claims come in. The insurance company has a certain amount of time to seek more information from the provider before they pay a claim and then report it to the town. We monitor the premiums that the town pays in total for the insurance, the claims that the insurance company pays, and the loss ratio shown on the screen in the far right column is a very convenient metric that shows us roughly how the plan is performing. For a loss ratio that is greater than 100%, we're looking at the insurance company operating a charity. They're losing money. For a loss ratio of 100%, they're breaking even as if they were a not-for-profit entity. And so in this day and age, even the not-for-profit insurance companies in North Carolina are actually operating under the same metrics as for-profit insurance companies, and they're looking to get their loss ratios closer to about 82%. That's what they call a tolerable loss ratio. That allows them to have an amount of money to pay administrative expenses as well as other expenses, and then have enough to make it worth their while in the form of profit. You can see that in the years of 2015-16, 2016-17, the amount of money that the town of Garner paid for health insurance was far less than the insurance companies spent on the town of Garner. And that resulted in significant rate increases that we had for 2015, 16, and even 17 because of the time lag in claims. The insurance company did not know that we were starting to turn a corner in 2017 until their claims data arrived or several months later. We have had, with Aetna and the health insurance program that we implemented with their ACO, which is an accountable care organization, significantly improved claims experience for a number of years now. Furthermore, Aetna has treated us most fairly in reducing the cost of the premiums in light of the lower claims costs that the town of Garner represents for Aetna. This is a remarkable thing. You will not hear people in other municipalities and counties talking about having rate decreases for the past 3 years. We still negotiate with Aetna, and on occasion we have their, of course every occasion we review their claims data and their renewal, but on some occasions we ask them to even go a little further than they were comfortable with initially to get even a better arrangement for the town of Garner. That's our job. Last year in particular, I'd like to bring to your attention that for the July 2021 through June 2022 year, where we currently only have claims data through September on the hard copy. It's missing from the digital version you have on screen. We're still trending very much in the right direction. We're very pleased to see these numbers. There might be a number that does jump off the screen, the 1,295% loss ratio. That is a mathematical aberration, and that is because as part of the renewal for July 1st, 2021, Aetna provided to the town, they wanted to give you more money back than their underwriting models even provided room for. They recognized that the impact of COVID on the health insurance claims, at least, was not at all what we had feared. Everybody would expect with this terrible virus that we were going to have significant hospital claims and such. And in fact, with the reduced utilization where surgeries and things were canceled or even postponed, we actually experienced lower claims as a result of COVID. It was a very surprising result. And the only way that Aetna could come up with additional ways to lower the cost in light of these lower claims amounts was to provide a rebate to Garner, which they did last year. It was $197,280 that Aetna provided the town for a rebate to get the health insurance cost even lower. They had provided a 6% rate reduction, and then on top of that, $197,000 rebate. So when that rebate was applied in 1 month, it made the premiums that the town paid only $5,884 instead of being closer to $200,000 for that month, resulting in a loss ratio that looks like it was a terrible event, but in fact it's just a mathematical aberration representing actually a very good event. We just took a rebate all in 1 month. We are currently working with Aetna on the renewal for July 1st, 2022. Knock on wood, the numbers as they are so far look solid. We look like we're still trending, and we will do our best to get for Garner a very fair renewal in consideration of the low claims costs that we are experiencing. This chart doesn't tell the whole story of what Aetna is also doing for us. They offer in this market something that the other insurers are not able to offer. We are currently experiencing a 55.6% discount on our healthcare claims overall. This is a measure of the very inflated medical cost that the provider bills to the insurance company, and then the reduction that the contracted discounted pricing that the insurance company has with providers, reduces that bill. It's almost like monopoly money. These providers submit these claims, they're for a very high dollar amounts, and then they're reduced by the contracted discounts. Aetna's discount for the town of Garner right now is 55.6%. We are not seeing anything like that for other insurers. We're seeing in the range of 48% to 52% for other insurers. That means Aetna is saving us off the top approximately 5% off the top of our claims cost. And the claims cost is a large component of the overall health insurance cost. So Aetna's very program, their contracts with providers, is benefiting Garner by helping keeping the Garner's insurance premiums for the health plan lower. And additionally, Aetna's program is structured in a way that other insurance providers in this market are not able to provide. All of the employees of Town of Garner have access to all of Aetna's broad network of providers, including Duke, including UNC, which are usually in opposite poles or goals. All the employees of Town of Garner and their dependents have access to all the providers. If they use what is called Aetna's Accountable Care Organization Network that emphasizes certain providers, the employees are rewarded with even lower out-of-pocket costs, but they still have access to all the providers. So with the discount, the provider discount on the claims, the access to the whole Aetna network, and the freedom of the employee to choose whether to use a provider in a smaller network to get a lower out-of-pocket cost is a really been a very beneficial arrangement for the Town of Garner. Are there any questions you would like me to answer about the data in this chart or the other things that I mentioned related to it? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to BD, who will finish out the presentation.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So obviously, when it comes to benefits renewal, we spend a significant amount of time on the healthcare piece, and that's critically important. It's critically expensive. But there are also other benefits that we work on in terms of the renewal process as well. So what I want to do is, just share with you some of the other benefits and some of the other work that will be going on over the next couple months. As each of you know, our dental plan is self-funded. We use Delta Dental to do all of our administration, and we are currently negotiating with Delta Dental on administrative fees. That particular contractual relationship expires on June 30th of this year, so we're looking to get another multi-year relationship with Delta Dental. With regards to the premium equivalent costs, or the costs associated with our staff members for their dental coverage, we do not anticipate that we will be looking at a rate increase for any of our premium equivalent costs for the next fiscal year. Our flexible spending and our COBRA administration are both through an organization called iSolved. For those of you that are wondering what that name is, the former name of that organization used to be InfiniSource. They have rebranded themselves into iSolved. Again, the contract that we have with iSolved for our FSA administration, our COBRA administration, expires on June 30th, and so we are working on a multi-year contractual relationship to continue that relationship with iSolved on those particular benefits administrations as well. Life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment, and short-term disability are all through an organization called Reliance Standard. We currently have a 2-year rate guarantee, which does not expire until June 30th of 2023. So we will continue to maintain that relationship unchanged going into the next fiscal year. We also provide Medicare Part D drug coverage to our retirees. In January of 2020, we moved away from Blue Cross Blue Shield and moved to an AARP United Healthcare drug coverage program. That has been working very well for us. Regretfully, for this year, which went into effect on January 1st, there was just under an 18% increase in the cost of that program for our retirees, paid for by the town. But just as reference, even with that increase, the change away from Blue Cross Blue Shield is still saving us 19%. So that was a good decision that we made 2 years ago to make that change from Blue Cross Blue Shield to AARP. And then last but not least, we provide a retiree Medicare supplement. We do that through Blue Cross Blue Shield. Those are all individual policies defined for each individual retiree. Those go into effect on June 1st, and we're currently working on those individual rates. We should have those available in late March. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about next steps in terms of how we proceed from this point forward. So over the next several months, we will be finalizing all of the initiatives that we have been working on. And our hope is that at the work session in March, we will come back to you with our recommendations for all of our benefits renewal for the 22-23 fiscal year. Based on your feedback, based on the decisions that we talk about that evening at the work session, our hope is that those recommendations or the changes that you propose would be approved on consent at the April 4th council meeting. We will then begin in earnest the planning for open enrollment, all of the behind the scenes work that needs to take place to get ready for that. Our staff open enrollment would then be from May 2nd through May 20th of 2022. That is the period in which all staff members can make changes without any ramifications or any need for special consideration. It's the one time each year that we're allowed to do that under tax law. And then all of those changes that the staff members make during open enrollment would become effective on July 1st, 2022, the first day of our new fiscal year. So that is the time frame that we hope to achieve between now and July 1st, 2022. With that, I will stop and see if anyone has any questions of myself or of Paul.
Perhaps so. I have one. Actually, it's just sort of a reminder. I know we recently received from your office, there's a time frame for employees to go online and fill out the, what is it, the health benefits form?
Yep.
Could you remind us?
The health assessment questionnaire?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's, we still have some time, I believe, but we don't want to
do.
wait. We have a couple months or more. I'm trying to
Yes.
remember.
March 18th
March 18th.
is the deadline for that, and we will be from the Human Resources Office sending out reminders to all of the staff members so that date is not forgotten. But March 18th is the deadline to complete the health assessment questionnaire for this year.
Okay, thank you. Council members, questions at this point on any of the information shared or questions otherwise? Go ahead, Mr. Matthews, yes.
All this is looking real good. I know, especially for the full-time employees, everything's paid for. With the way we're trending here, are we potentially looking? I know with the family plans, you know, that's a little different ball of wax. So, are we looking? How's that trending now? Are we seeing good things happen there? Where those rates might be? Can this thing get better with the family plan versus just the employee?
So you want to go ahead and
Sure, I
take
can speak to that.
Sure.
Answer your question, the family plan rates are not trending like any better than the employee rates or the employee and spouse rates. They're sort of all in the same bucket and they're moving at about the same rate. We don't expect any kind of significant breaks for family plan coverage. I don't want to give away some of the positives we might be able to bring to you in the future, but I can at least say that one of the reasons that management is considering self-funding with its additional burdens and administrative burdens on towns' human resources and financial departments is because we're hoping to leverage the savings that we may generate with self-funding and use them to offset some of the higher costs of family coverage. So that is a long-term goal. And we see this self-funding as perhaps producing the not only the revenue savings to have money to throw toward the expensive family coverage, but also it gives the town of Garner the freedom and the license to set their own rates for the different enrollment tiers. And they could, in a sense, change the tilt of the rates so that family coverage is less expensive and it's, in a sense, subsidized by employee coverage to help reduce the cost of that family coverage. So for the fully insured Aetna or any other insurance company, we don't see a break coming, although we would want one. But should the town go self-funded, there's more flexibility that the town has to address that concern that's been a long-term concern. Thank you.
Let me ask you, if the town decides to go self-funding, how much flexibility do we have then if after, I don't know, 12 months or whatever, we reach a point where that doesn't seem to be working as well as we liked and we go back to a more normative kind, is there a wait period or a time frame in which we could move back, as it were? I'm not sure I'm asking the question exactly correctly.
And
You understand what I'm saying?
Was the move back from a self-funded arrangement to a
Right.
fully insured? Yep. Yes, there's no problem moving back from a self-funded arrangement to a fully insured arrangement. There is a little bit of a hangover, you might call it. The town would be on the hook for what is called run-out claims. So even though, say for instance, June 30th of one year, you would think, okay, we tried self-funding, we're going back to fully insured July 1st. In fact, by the nature of the health insurance claims that I discussed when we were looking at the chart, how they come in months later. In fact, even the big expensive hospital claims might be revised 4 or 5, even 6 months later. The town's still on the hook for the self-funded expenses months later only because there's something in the works that hasn't finalized and come in yet. But as far as the legal arrangements, the contractual arrangements, no problem. It's just that financial obligation that lingers longer than you might expect.
All right. Council, other questions regarding the information shared? Mr. Dellinger, yes.
You have a couple of questions on the self-funding. One, I guess, followed at the end, is there an existing model that could show us the cost savings that we could look at some point? And then the other is, what is sort of the landscape in this region of self-funded versus fully insured? That's the first question. And the second one is there any reduction in our ability to negotiate with the existing provider, or we switch providers if we go to a self-funded model?
I'll make sure I heard you right. So one of the questions is like what kind of leverage we would have in negotiating for a self-funded arrangement with the insurance carriers in the area. Then the answer is, oh yeah, they're interested in that kind of business, even though that theoretically the whole reason we're going self-funded is to kind of cut out the middleman. We're cutting out a lot of their profits, a lot of their risk margins where they increase the cost just in case something happens unexpected, and we also get to avoid a lot of state taxes on health insurance premiums, believe it or not. So we do have a number of insurance companies, all the big players will certainly entertain a self-funded proposal, and we would evaluate them to get the best deal for the town. As far as the landscape here in this region for self-funding, our large clients all self-fund. Town of Garner's on the small side to self-fund. Management will have a lot of things to weigh because as you're smaller, the averages can shift more violently than a large employer with a couple thousand employees. And so there's this potential for a rough ride. In other words, we might be able to predict a trend and say, hey, over the long haul, you're going to save 5%. But it might be a rough ride with peaks and valleys and on the way to that destination. And I think your question was, would the town have some information to evaluate in consideration or in considering the self-funded model? Certainly. In fact, we have good information from Aetna on which we can project costs in the future, and there is just by the nature of it, a matter of probability and risk that we can also build into the model, and it's pretty good. In other words, we can give you a pretty good cost estimate, even though it's just a projection and just an estimate. It should be pretty reliable for decision purposes.
Just one quick follow-up. Has there been conversations about the impacts of a future fire merger as well with regards to this model and its impacts and flexibility and benefits and rest as well?
Yes, there has been. We've been made well aware if you're considering adding quite a number of employees. Because we don't know the exact health, we don't know the claims for those employees to evaluate them as a population as to whether they're more expensive or less expensive than the average Town of Garner employee right now. We could just make some general assumptions and say, hey, they're probably relatively healthy, you never know. And as far as self-funding, hey, the more the merrier. The more numbers we have, the smoother the ride. Those peaks and valleys can tend to average out a little better. And so, the more the merrier.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
Oh, there are other local government agencies in the Triangle area, larger towns that self-fund, correct? Can you tell us some of those? I'm assuming Raleigh and Cary do. I'm just making an assumption since they're so big.
Absolutely. Raleigh, Cary, Apex, they are all self-funding. And what has happened with the Affordable Care Act that came out in 2010 and really started to take effect in 2012, it only sweetened the reward for going self-funded. And so we see a lot more smaller entities self-funding than we used to, and that's because they're willing to take that rougher ride to get the benefits of self-funding as well as the extra benefits that the Affordable Care Act made possible, or actually you're avoiding a negative in that case that sweetens the reward for going self-funded. So you would be in very good company if you were self-funded.
Thank you.
One question here. I know you don't have a crystal ball in regards to this question, or maybe you do. But is anybody projecting any significant change, I'd say, at the federal level? Obviously, back when the Affordable Care Act first went into operation, there was a lot of talk about terminating that and so forth and back and forth. And I'm not aware personally of any initiative at the federal level to do a major restructuring of the insurance and the healthcare system. But I certainly wouldn't claim to be in the know so much. But at any rate, people in your position and others are, I assume, not expecting anything that would, in some significant way, change the playing field, so to speak, that might happen at that level.
I'm sorry to report that any kind of relief, which I think is necessary, I mean, things have only gotten worse, and they're getting to the point where a person like me who does projections into the future, we see, there's got to be a breaking point, and it doesn't look like it's that far ahead in the future. So something has to be done. I doubt that it would. I haven't heard talk of anything meaningful from that would be coming from the federal level down to provide relief. But we have seen innovation and people trying different things. There is what's called reference-based pricing. There are some insurance, even self-funded employers that are saying simply, we'll take what Medicare's rates are for all the services and we'll simply pay a % based on that. Usually it's a % above 100%, so maybe they pay 120%. So that they're sort of just creating a scale out there and trying to see if that saves them money. There has been quite a bit of move on restricting prescription drug use so that instead of the very wide and free formulary list of covered drugs that the town of Garner has, you might restrict some of the more expensive ones and not cover them as well or at all to save money. And we're also seeing what we have been fortunately on the forefront. Garner stepped in at the right time with Aetna, and this accountable care organization model has been probably producing the most traction. Our Blue Plan didn't have it at the time when we needed it. Well, they had it, but it wasn't a good fit for town of Garner. The local Blue Plan is now making an accountable care organization across the state. So that seems to be the direction that the large players are moving. These contracts that are of a completely different nature than we'd seen in the past with fee-for-service. So with fee-for-service, it said, hey, if you have a doctor's appointment of this type, you get this much money, regardless of the outcome or the result. What the accountable care organization says is that they throw a quality measure in there, that you get a certain amount of money, and then how much money you get above that depends on the outcome. And so, I mean, it almost seems like common sense that you would want to throw some sort of quality measure in there and tie it to price to incentivize the providers to perform. But this is actually a newer innovation that's only been around for several years, and we're seeing more and more of it. So, to summarize, I don't think we're going to see any kind of federal move that would provide any meaningful relief. But we are seeing moves in the industry, especially the Accountable Care Organization, that has a track record of providing significant relief. For example, here at the town of Garner, we know that our Accountable Care Organization, the Aetna Whole Health, as we call it, is producing 15% savings off of the broader Aetna network. So that's pretty significant. We could always use more, but 15% is pretty significant. Thank you.
All right, others, questions, comments? Yeah, okay.
Questions. So trying to understand the self-funding because this is new to me. So imagine a scenario where you're in the middle of a workday here and a tornado comes over town hall and over the police station and puts 50 employees in the hospital for 3 months, and we're self-funded. What does that look like in terms of your self-funded model versus fully insured?
Well, this may be new to you, but I think you've got the idea. With the fully insured model, let's start there because that's what we have and that's what we're most familiar with. You know, if all these employees end up with some tremendously expensive bills, for the time being, you're okay. You already contracted with your price for last, July 1st renewal. If you cost the insurance company millions more than they expected, you're okay until your next renewal. Naturally, what's going to happen is the insurance company is going to say that they lost. That loss ratio on this chart, I was mentioning that there was like a mathematical aberration with that 1,295%. I said, well, if we had 300, 400%, which I've actually had with a client a couple of years ago, it was just a thing that can happen. The insurance company that you currently have is naturally going to produce a renewal for you that is, astronomically high. Then you might say, well, let's sidestep that. Let's go to another insurer. They're going to look not only at your experience, but what residual risk remains. Those 50 employees in the hospital, maybe 10 of them has something serious that requires significant expense in the future, and they will price that accordingly. And so that even alternative self-insured renewals, fully insured renewals would show some sort of increased cost, potentially very significant increased cost. The self-funded model is very straightforward in that you pay for what you really have. You don't need the insurance company to evaluate your risk so much and to make their forecast and adjust their pricing. You're just going to pay the claims. So in the year that those 50 employees in your example end up in the hospital with those high claims, you're going to have some very expensive, very difficult bills that you owe due to pay the insurance company who's simply relaying the money to the medical providers. You are protected by what we call stop-loss insurance. So even though we're self-funded or self-insured and we're paying for the small and the medium stuff right out of your budget, you also are buying an insurance policy on the high level that picks up claims when they become catastrophic. We get to set the level, meaning we, the town of Garner, gets to decide how high they want to set the threshold before that emergency insurance, that stop loss kicks in. So you might choose to take more risk because then your stop loss insurance threshold is higher and your price for that insurance is lower. You might choose in the beginning years to have a lower level until you're comfortable with the self-funded model, and then you might raise it in the future to gain some savings after you're comfortable with the idea. So with the self-funded model, that first year with those 50 employees could be tremendously expensive, the kind of white-knuckled, nail-biting thing, especially if it's in just the first couple of years of being self-funded. We will set up a mathematical projection so that you're accumulating reserves as you start self-funding. But in those first couple of years, your reserves aren't as high as they will be in several years down the road. And so if you run into one of those catastrophic events in those first couple of years, it's going to be tough. Whether you're self-funded, whether you're fully insured, it's going to be tough, but it would be especially a nail-biter if you're self-funded. And that's just the nature of it. Thank you.
Okay, anything else, council? Thank you, sir. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We will certainly look forward to seeing you in a couple months with our recommendations. Appreciate your time tonight.
Well, okay. All right, let me get back to my agenda here. The next item is a discussion with our town attorney, I believe, animal ordinance amendment. Welcome, Ms. Jones.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about the 2022 animal control amendments. You might recall last February 1st, you adopted some significant revisions to the animal control ordinance that had been initiated by Chief Binns at the time. But 2021 was an interesting year. Just to refresh your memory, in North Carolina alone, there were 4 human fatalities from dog attacks, one of which occurred in Garner, unfortunately. Shortly after that, a venomous zebra cobra escaped in Raleigh, which had escaped in November of 2020 and not caught until almost July of 2021. And then a little bit later in the summer, 12 wolf dog hybrids escaped in Orange County. 8 were initially impounded. 4 were on the loose for quite some time. I think 1 has never been found, although presumed probably dead in the wild at this point. So those were 3 things that happened last year that I don't think anybody was really anticipating. As a result, the legal department, along with the police department and planning, have looked at some, proposed revisions to address these situations. And you may recall that in the court case, as a result of the dog attack last year, our ordinance was upheld, but we do still think there are some tweaks that can strengthen and address these situations that we weren't thinking about when you adopted amendments last year. So just to give you a frame of reference, typically people think of animal control as your pets and livestock, but we also regulate dangerous animals, inherently dangerous mammals, and then wild or exotic animals. So dogs, what we learned last year is that there's 4 situations that we hadn't really thought about or addressed specifically in the ordinance. One is if an owner brings a dangerous dog that's been found or deemed dangerous in another jurisdiction into Garner. One that was presented in the case last year, the owner wants to take the dog and move to another jurisdiction. Should there be an automatic denial of a permit under certain circumstances? And then who really has standing to appeal these kinds of determinations or permits? So the proposal is to require a permit application within 5 days of a dangerous dog determination. As you may recall, we had kind of had to wait it out last year, 60 days, and then to also shorten the time from 60 to 30 days to obtain that permit. I believe probably the longer time frame was for people to build external shelters, but you can go and buy these kinds of pens that have, ceilings, floors, kinds of things now that are a little more readily available. And then we're also proposing to allow a dog owner, a neighbor, or a victim of an attack to appeal either a permit issuance or denial. With permit denials, this, what I call the automatic, is that dogs which have killed a person or inflicted serious injury on a person would be immediately impounded and then euthanized within 5 days unless an appeal is filed, and not eligible for a permit. Now, this would be a break from state law. As you know, the 1 bite rule, this would basically say you don't get a second chance once you've killed a person or inflicted serious injury on a person. They still would have the opportunity to appeal, and we'd have to go through that process. That's where the appeal process for the dangerous dog determination is required under state law. We're also adding in that the police chief has the discretion to deny a permit based on the totality of circumstances if there is an unreasonable risk to public health, safety, or welfare. One of the arguments in the court case last year was if I checked all the boxes, I had the secure enclosure, I got the microchip, I got the insurance, I got the muzzle, then the argument from the attorney was that there's no discretion in staff, you just have to issue the permit and give that to them. not proposing to outline certain circumstances because we don't know what those circumstances might be, but to make it clear that this is a holistic determination to protect the safety of the neighborhood, where there might be something that's less than a fatal or serious injury attack. For instance, if someone's pet is destroyed through an attack or something like that, or this animal is escalating in its behavior and becoming more and more dangerous, or there's just an inherent risk that this dog is going to escape, or that the dog owners might not put the muzzle on every time, keep them under control, those kinds of things. So to clearly state that there's some discretion to look at all of the circumstances and determine, and not make it I can check all the boxes and keep this dangerous dog in the town limits. Again, with appeals by state law, a dangerous dog determination has to be heard by a board of appeal, separate from the police department animal control. We're not proposing any changes. That board of appeal is appointed by the town manager. Hasn't had to be used in very many circumstances in the last few years, but it meets all of the state statutory requirements. The proposal has to allow permit appeals to be heard by the town manager and then appealed to Superior Court on the record. That would be a new process. The benefit of this type of process for an appeal is that we would have more control over it. One, that there's an administrative remedy that has to be exhausted before they can get into court by going to the appeal to the town manager. And then for it to be on the record does not allow them to come up with new evidence later once the court schedules some kind of date. And again, that would just be on the permit decision, not on the determination that the dog is indeed dangerous. So the situation that came up last summer was the owner wants to, the dog's been deemed dangerous. The owner wants to move to another jurisdiction. Under current state law, that owner is supposed, under state law, it doesn't address the fact that an owner might move from one jurisdiction to another. It just says if that owner wants to give the dog or sell the dog to someone else, they have to notify, whatever animal control authority made the determination, and then also the new owner that this dog has been deemed dangerous. There's no other notification required under state law. So we would propose that they have to, if they're going to move, they have to notify animal control in that new jurisdiction. And then if the dog had been impounded due to an attack, it would only be released to the new animal control authority and not the owner. And that would ensure that we're not passing a problem on to another jurisdiction, and that in order for that animal to go live in a new jurisdiction, it's going to meet whatever the local requirements are at that time. And another area is what if a dog's dangerous and they move into Garner? Under this proposal, they would have to submit a permit application within 5 days of bringing the dangerous dog to Garner. And then again, the police chief would have the discretion to deny that permit after investigating what were the circumstances around the dangerous dog determination, and whether or not they can meet our safety standards that are a part of the permit process in Garner. With respect to wild or exotic animals, the existing ordinance prohibits the possession of swine. I was a little surprised about that, but no hog farms in Garner. Venomous reptiles and wild or exotic animals within town limits. The proposed amendment, we would impose a civil penalty and require reimbursement for costs incurred while capturing, sheltering, or impounding these animals. This is something learned from the Raleigh case with the snake, that just in the time that they knew that the snake was out, which was not the entire 8-month period, I think the owner of that snake was charged to pay restitution over $13,000. So if you remember, that was only about a week's time, and some significant resources went into, making sure the public was safe and being able to capture that snake. Now, they may have also had some cost, because I think there were 75 total snakes taken from that household. We did already in the ordinance have this for inherently dangerous mammals, but it didn't apply to all of the wild or exotics. This required reimbursement for costs. Large constricting snakes, which is how the state defines them, your boa constrictors, cobras, pythons, those. State law already requires that they have a secure enclosure with a lock, that there's identifying information, a written safety protocol, and an escape recovery plan, and it requires the owner to immediately notify local law enforcement if the snake escapes. So in Raleigh, that was one of the misdemeanor charges, that the owner had failed to notify local law enforcement when that snake first escaped. For venomous reptiles, which includes snakes, I don't know what all the venomous ones are, but there's probably several of them not native to North Carolina. State law imposes criminal penalties if a person is killed or suffers a life-threatening injury. And then there's also a penalty for releasing non-native venomous reptiles, large snakes, and crocodiles into the wild here. We would propose adding to the town ordinance to clarify the definition to include reptiles. We were not including reptiles under wild or exotic animals. That would then be the snakes, alligators, and crocodiles. And then any hybrid or crossbreed of any of the listed animals. So the listed animals in the definition now are, bobcats, raccoons, things that you would normally think exist in North Carolina in the wild. But the existing definition also says, anything that you would normally have in a zoo, which would be your lions and tigers and things like that. So we would, again, add a civil penalty and reimbursement of cost for impounding, sheltering, or euthanizing these animals. Happy to answer any questions. I had sent you the full draft of all of the amendments, and I can pull that up if you need to. But if you don't have any questions and you feel that these are acceptable, we can place them on a future agenda to be adopted.
I'm sure there are some. Just a quick comment. I want to thank you for your work on this. I know you worked in conjunction with the police department and perhaps others as well. And the unfortunate incident we suffered here was a traumatic thing for many people. And of course, it took up a lot of your time before that matter was resolved, at least to the satisfaction of many. So thank you. I have gone through and looked at the items there, and I appreciate the work you've done. I'm sure you're confident that these changes will meet muster as it relates to any state statutes. They're consistent with those, and so we shouldn't have any.
Right. We're fortunate that we're enabled under state law to have our own animal control program and can be more restrictive than state law.
Mr. Matthews, I believe you had a question.
Mary asked one of my questions, and you did too. Thank you for the quickness on this. I know it was what happened, and I guess our goal is hopefully to never see that happen again, or have to put everybody through it again. And so I guess, in your professional opinion, we've eliminated all of the may or should. Everything is pretty much is cut and dry, so the interpretation is of any of our ordinances is not. Somebody can interpret it a little different, and make a case out of it. You feel like everything is where it needs to be, I guess is my question.
I don't know that I could ever guarantee that, but I do think, based on what we learned from the court case and trying to anticipate some situations that might occur in the future, that these proposed amendments would strengthen the ordinance and make it something would slip through the cracks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Inch, you mentioned on an earlier slide, you talked about if the human was killed and also the serious injuries that occurred. What is, yes, inflicted, okay. What defines serious injury? I'm just throwing something out there that everybody's interpretation of a serious injury. I know in the case of the tragedy that killed the little girl, if that had not happened, but it was just the injuries to the mother, I would make the assumption that those are considered serious injuries. I just didn't know is there a definition for serious injuries?
There is a definition in state law, and our ordinance closely tracks that.
Okay.
So it's actually severe injury is any physical injury that results in broken bones or disfiguring lacerations or requires cosmetic surgery or hospitalization.
I want to make sure, because I read that, and I just wanted to make sure that whose interpretation of what's serious or severe is, so it's already covered. We've already got that covered based off state law. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Behringer, any questions? Mr. Dellinger?
Two quick questions. One thing stood out on the standing for appeal. It says the dog owner, neighbors, and the victim. Are members of the like immediate family included as well? So if someone's killed by a dog, they can't, appeal or challenge. So is there like a member of the family? Are they included in that standing?
Right, I would think so. Our ordinance didn't exactly state anything like that, and one of the arguments was that, it should only be the dog owner that can appeal this, but in practice, in the past, I think there was one case where a person's dog was killed. That person did participate as a victim. So the way, it's actually, the victim of the attack or the person who owns an animal that is a victim of the attack as well. But the proposal is just for the adjoining property owners. I thought about, do we want to say neighborhood, but then it gets difficult to define, what one person thinks of as a neighborhood, and particularly wanted to deal with the situation where, you might live in one neighborhood and back up to another property owner in a different neighborhood, but the adjoining property owners would most likely be the most impacted by having to live in that situation.
And you touched on the other one, and other animals are included as well? Okay. Attacks on them. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Vance?
No questions have been answered. No questions.
I think this is a hypothetical, and I think I know the answer, but at any rate, in a circumstance where dog owner, could be a dangerous animal owner, lives outside our town in another place, and they were to call to inquire as to whether or not they could bring their dangerous animal into our jurisdiction, this doesn't allow us to, I guess, look at or analyze the circumstance that caused the dog to be labeled as dangerous and to say to the owner, no, you cannot bring them in. I guess as long as the owner is able to meet the criteria that says you must put this animal in a certain enclosure with all the specifications, we wouldn't have the ability to say, no, you can't bring them into our town. Is that right?
So I think the existing ordinance, I might have to defer to the police chief on how they've dealt with those kinds of inquiries, but the existing ordinance really seemed to talk about if Garner deems it dangerous, then here are the next steps. And what we wanted to do is clarify that this would apply to other dogs brought into the jurisdiction. And as you may recall, Franklin County, I believe, they adopted an ordinance that just said, you bring a dangerous dog, we're going to impound them immediately, and in 30 or 60 days, we're going to euthanize the dog. Because we have a permitting process for our own residents, new residents should be entitled to the same kind of process. But wanted to make it clear that, again, if they move in, it's not a checklist about the enclosure and the muzzle and keeping them on a leash and those kinds of things, that a determination would be made. I believe there's some this isn't protected information. Dog attacks and animal control records are public information. So there is, I believe, some sharing of information when you know it. But again, under state law, the state law notification provision only applies if you transfer that dog to another owner. It doesn't address the fact that you might move from one jurisdiction to another in the state. So we did want to cover that situation.
Okay. Go ahead.
I
Mr.
touched
Singleton.
on that. You may have already addressed this and I missed it. Someone comes and uses one of our dog parks, or walks their dog in the park, and the dog is away and either inflicts serious injury or kill someone, but they don't live in Garner. The accident happened here, but they live 30 minutes away. The accident happened here. There's nothing about a permit because they don't live here to issue a permit, but all these rules will still apply to the animal, which may, if the animal attacked a person in the corporate limits of the town of Garner, correct?
Yes, so any dog that comes here to visit in one of the parks or is just visiting someone here, still has to comply with, they have to have a license. Well, they don't have to have a license here, but they have to have their rabies, and, they can't be at large, they can't attack someone. So that's maybe an unknown question as to what would happen if they're just visiting here and the dog gets impounded. But the idea is that once the dog has been determined dangerous by Garner Animal Control, we wouldn't just want to release it back to the owner. We'd want to release it back to an animal control authority who can manage it wherever the dog does live. So I can add a tweak to indicate that now in some attacks the dog might not be impounded because they don't find out right away. That would probably be the less serious attacks, or some dog attacks are stray dogs that it's hard to determine who the owner is or to locate the dog right away. But I think in the instance of an confiscation or an impoundment, that we can add language that says it's only released to the animal control authority where the owner resides. Now, some animal control authorities might not have a permitting process or might be less concerned, but again, it would, be for that jurisdiction to assess it under their own rules.
Mr. Singleton's question too, if somebody brings a dog to Garner, it does something, and then they leave Garner, go back home to outside of the town limits, do we still have some authority to deem it dangerous, even if it's outside of our immediate control?
Yes, I think you can deem it dangerous. If you have enough information to ascertain the dog and the owner, certainly can be deemed dangerous for incidents that happen in the town. I don't know that we'd have authority to go impound the dog in another jurisdiction if they've already left the jurisdiction. But it could be deemed dangerous, and then that information could be communicated to the owner's, the jurisdiction that has authority where the owner resides.
I don't want to ask silly questions, I guess, and or get into too many hypotheticals. I was a little curious. Well, once an animal has been deemed dangerous, and I believe our policy would require that, either on the chip or something, that identity be known. I suppose for the remainder of that animal's life, they remain in that status. I mean, there's not a way for an animal to be deemed dangerous as a result of some incident, and then, I don't know, the owner put them through some special training or whatever. You have an opinion on that?
The way the system is, even under state law, once you're deemed dangerous, it's deemed dangerous for the life of the dog, and there isn't a remedial type program. The only way to address that is you would have to appeal and it be not deemed dangerous. So where I can envision this happen is where, there's a bunch of dogs and they start fighting, and which one was the aggressor or were they all dangerous at that point? You know, there might be, or instance where was the animal provoked? You know, what was someone trespassing? I mean, those are issues to be determined in the dangerous dog application, but certainly, I guess, retraining and things like that could be a factor that the police department could consider in whether a permit should be issued.
Right. Okay.
But we don't have a requirement for certain obedience training or that proposed at this point.
Okay. Anybody else? I would just conclude by saying that, again, thank you for the work you've done on this. I hope we never have to test this ordinance in the way that we did with this previous tragic incident. I think we've all learned, I don't know if you'd say some new lessons, but certainly we have understood that our policy needed some changing, and you've created that, so that'll come back to us for a vote. And I can't thank you enough for doing that. And to the parents out there of our deceased child, we would just say that this is at least the town's effort to try to ensure that nothing even similar to this would ever happen in our town again. So thank you. That's all I have, unless anybody else has anything. Thank you
So if
again.
you have consensus, I can bring it back, you know, as early as the next meeting, I guess February 7th, I believe.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you much.
And it will be effective the date we adopted, right, Ms. Jones? Yes. The new ordinance, okay, good.
Okay. We will next hear from our Parks Director, Maria, who has a presentation at this time. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. Give me 2 seconds here to get my presentation, get my glasses on first of all, and then get my presentation
Yes.
lined up here. I did bring paper copies, which I'm going to ask one of my team members to help me distribute. So this evening, while we're bringing to your attention for your consideration are changes in the department structure in 2 specific areas. One is in the supplemental staff, which is our part-time contingent, and then in our senior leadership level. And these proposed changes will help our department address the job market conditions, which we have spoken before, and I think anyone who employs part-time employees in the nation is very much aware of those, as well as position our team to better address the growth of our department, which again, it's an exciting opportunity that is in front of us. I'll start with the supplemental staff, and the proposed changes that we want you to consider, or that we ask for you to consider, are to 3 main changes. Consolidate the multiple entry-level categories that we have, and the titles to create job families for positions that have similar or related responsibilities, but are structured in a way that have progressively higher levels of tasks, of skills and abilities to provide in time with promotional opportunities. Again, we really value our supplemental staff, and at this point they have no opportunities for promotions or merit increases. We also want to bring the performance evaluation and merit increases to supplemental staff, and this is a concept that the HR department and Parks have been working and discussing pre-COVID, and I think COVID has certainly interrupted a lot of the thinking about that, but hopefully we'll get back to that, and BD and I have been sharing information about that. And we also want to bring the compensation issue in context, again, with the current job market conditions. I think you have seen, oops, where's my next? You've seen this information before. It came in a memo that the town manager shared with you. And it's to give you a frame of reference for the current entry-level supplemental positions in our department. With the titles and the compensation information, we have 7 entry-level categories that are set now in grades 3 to 9. And as a frame of reference, I'm sharing with you a parks maintenance position, which is really public works. But just to give you an idea of where they stand in terms of grade of compensation, as well as having one position that oversees, so that it has tasks that are multiple, from landscaping to repairing parks. So it's really overseeing the broader array of activities that a parks maintenance worker has, and that's kind of the idea that we want to bring into our recreation structure. We also have in our department what we consider mid-level supplemental positions, and these are classifications that are a bit more specialized. And we believe for this, the compensation situation is not an issue. These are compensated at a more competitive space in the market. And we have not experienced with this particular positions the same challenges in recruitment and retention that we have with our entry-level supplementals. But we would want to implement with this group the same evaluation process and merit increase opportunities that we would offer any other supplemental staff. We think that's an important component, particularly of retention of talented and experienced staff members. Now this is, I'm sure you're aware of this, and these 2 slides may be a little bit redundant, but I wanted to share with you how some of our peer agencies in Wake County, other parks organizations, their context in their current recruitment of part-time positions. Just to give you sort of a quick summary of the 13 positions that you will see in these 2 slides, only 3 have posted compensation below $10. It's not a perfect comparison. Everybody seems to have a different title, but these are all, again, part-time positions that have similar roles to the ones that our supplemental staff carries on. And this is just information that I picked one day, and I went to all the career websites of our peer agencies and looked at what part-time positions they were recruiting that were very similar to the ones that we have in our department. That's just, reference information. So this is the proposed changes on the slide number 7. The structural changes that we're proposing for this entry-level group of positions, again, is to create a family of recreation leaders, numbers 1 through 4, where we'll be consolidating the multiple titles that we have now. This slide shows how a recreation leader 1 would be the entry point to the field. And this is primarily the roles that they would undertake would be related to our camp and after-school programming. And this would be the position where young people enrolled in high school would really have a good opportunity to gain experience and learn about the wonderful parks and recreation profession. Recreation Leader 2 is the next level, and this will be for staff that has a bit more experience, may have worked with us the summer before, may sort of be graduated from high school. And again, a part-time position, a really good opportunity for people that want to learn more about the profession. The next level, it's Recreation Leader 3, and this is where we would consolidate the positions that support building, facility, or programs. They provide customer service, they support our rentals, provide some level of coaching. This is really frontline staff of the Parks Department that at times works without a supervisor present. So it's a higher level of responsibility for town programs and assets. And last, the sort of Recreation Leader 4, this is primarily for supplemental staff that has some level of supervisory responsibility for other supplemental staff. And it's primarily the boathouse, one of our summer operations, as well as lead instructors or coaches. Now for these positions, you may note that the proposed salary grade and range is TBD, and that's because the town is about to undertake a compensation study that we hope will take a really close look, or that we know will take a really close look at these particular positions as we reconfigure them. In the short term, though, we did want for you to consider, go ahead and get your feedback on increasing the compensation for the existing positions as noted in this slide. And again, we're trying to be competitive with the market, maybe a little bit above market, so that Garner becomes an employer of choice for entry-level recreation professionals. And we believe, again, this would really help us with our recruiting efforts, which, as you know, have been quite a challenge in the past few months. And that is sort of wraps up the section on our supplemental proposed changes. And I'm going to move now to the full-time staff.
Would it be okay if I see if council has any questions about that?
Yes, sir.
That before, yeah. So you've heard our director talk about the supplemental wage status and the proposed change there. Any questions or comments in that regard? Mr. Singleton, I recognize. Go ahead.
Ms. Maria, the proposed minimum on these positions that you showed here, will those take effect?
Well, there's a slide at the end that talks about cost. We think we can certainly absorb the cost this fiscal year because we do have salary savings from positions that we haven't been able to fit. Look at you, but I also want the microphone to be able to function. And then, again, it depends on your approval, and then we'll work with HR to make those changes as needed.
I sent in an email to you and talked with you about, I drive around and see signs everywhere, $10, $12, $15 an hour starting. And it's not with government agencies, but, at least these are better than they were. And, I know you've been having some challenges hiring filling some of these positions. So this is a good start. And also I like the fact that you have relabeled their job titles. I appreciate that.
Would you have a question?
Some of the same comments because Greg and I talked about these salaries a couple of meetings back.
Yes, sir.
And I'm glad to see these numbers getting out of that category because it's a tough market out there. And especially when it seems like 15 is starting to become the norm everywhere right now, and people can jump on that versus $10 or $11 an hour. Whatever the final result is here, I'm always saying let's do it right the first time, so we ain't got to come back 6 months. So that $11 that's really a little too lean.
Well, I mean, we want to be sort of fiscally realistic within, we have to live within our means. That's sort of, as a public servant, that's the principle that I like to follow. We have looked again at the market, what our peer agencies are sort of in the direction that they're going. The 11 is primarily for the summer camp and after school part-timers. I think I would say the majority of the positions that work with us year-round are either facility attendants or desk attendants, and we're proposing to bring those at 13. So we're certainly, I can run numbers again, but we're wanting to again sort of make sure that we're still within our fiscal.
That's what I'm saying. You can be frugal but not have no employees.
Well, I think the process we're looking at taking here, if I may, Mayor, sorry.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Is we know some immediate changes need to be made, so this is what this is proposing, but we also proposing, as Maria showed in a previous slide, we would put all these positions into the pay study that we're going to do. We committed to doing a comprehensive townwide pay study, so that hopefully will set them right or to the market, but recognizing that something needed to be done immediately right now, and we made our best assumptions about where those numbers should be, but the pay study will be the thing that really defines what each of these positions are, and then set the actual pay scale for them.
So when are we looking at putting these numbers in effect? What's the game plan? You're probably gonna get there. I might be getting ahead of you.
The ones that are, let me just move to this slide. These ones that you see here, we would love to implement them in in February, to be honest with you, based on your approval. They still have to come back to you. Do these have to come back? Compensation? No. So we could, again, if we get your consent that this is a good idea, we would start implementing them. We're almost in February.
Okay,
Good.
yeah. Any other questions down here? Mr. Vance?
I just want
Mr. Dellinger?
Gotta pay people.
Okay, Ms. Behringer? Okay. At one time, just to think about comparisons, so was a minimum wage being paid in Wake County or Wake County employees $12? Has that changed, or am I way
I'm
off
not sure
base?
about that. But the living wage, as some call it, I'm not sure if they set that at $12 or not.
Okay.
You mean the government Wake County, not
Yeah, right.
everybody in Wake County?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, I was thinking I'd heard that at some point fairly recently. Mr. Hodges.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. One of the clarifications I just wanted to make sure I made, Mr. Singleton mentioned thanking Maria for rolling the positions up into new titles. One thing you'll see on this slide, those titles have moved off of this slide. So we are proposing to move forward with the numbers right now for each of the positions in that bucket or that column, but not actually change the titles until we can get validation through the pay study that those are the right way to approach it. So I just want to make sure that, since he mentioned it when we were on this slide, that there wasn't an expectation that we were going to also implement the name changes. We're just going to take each of those positions and make that the minimum for each one in that column short term.
Okay. Any other questions? I know you're ready to move on to the next
Oh,
section.
no, I want to answer all your questions
Yeah,
first.
okay. All right. Any other comments down here? Okay. I believe we're ready to move along.
Great. So we're also looking at making some changes, a shift to the structure of the senior leadership positions in the department. And this approach is to change our department's sort of very hierarchical structure by flattening the senior management level. And that is really to reduce one layer of supervisory between top management and the next level. In developing this concept, certainly there's benefits about improved communication, more direct relationship with the staff, but we also looked at it in the context of how our department is going to be growing, what are some of the areas that will have growth, and some of the staffing gaps that I have observed during my time here with the town of Garner. We also wanted to sort of set our staff in what I call work groups that have comparable activities and comparable resources, and the services that they provide are somewhat similar, more specialized than others, but they have a lot of commonalities. And then the services that are agency-wide, meaning that are shared by all the business units of the department, those will be consolidated in one position. There's no proposal for layoffs or salary reductions. It's really a way of restructuring the way our department functions. So this gives you sort of a visual of how our department is currently structured. There's a director, there's an assistant director that is a grade 30 in our compensation plan. And then there's two G28 positions. One it's called Recreation Superintendent, the other one's called Cultural Arts and Events Manager. The proposed structure essentially combines levels 2 and 3 into one senior leadership level. And the other thing that it does is it's looking at how our industry, the Parks and Recreation field, looks at positions. We also thought that having them have similar titles would really help in the way we present our department and its functions to the public. And this sort of gives you a bit more detail. I mentioned, work groups. And the concept, again, is to have those 4 senior leadership positions be the point person for each work group. For example, the operations superintendent would oversee the agency-wide functions, budget, accreditation, marketing, customer service, our database, advisory committees that now are sort of spread all over the department. This would give them one point person to really keep up with their activity, and it would also oversee the town-wide events which our department produces. July 3rd, the extravaganza, Easter egg hunt, and a few others that we produce, Trick or Treat the Trails. Recreation and athletics looks at sort of all the recreational fitness and athletic activities that we offer for youth and adults. Our sports fields, our camps, that type of program that is really based on recreation and leisure. The arts and culture work group It's primarily GPAC, but we have sort of stepped into a little bit into public art, and we love to continue in that area with some partners. We also have some opportunities for park concerts. That it's something that the town has done in the past to great success. And it's, again, a very popular activity that we hope to bring back. So there's some opportunities for expanded programming that is also mentioned in our park comp plan, as well as having, again, a point person for the downtown activities. And Parks and Nature would obviously oversee our passive parks, which are primarily Lake Benson and White Deer. And when I say passive parks, there's a lot of activity happening at those parks, but they're not athletic in nature. It's really more about self-guided. And I know the mayor walks there frequently, so that's not a passive activity. Anything that's non-athletic essentially would be part of this particular work group. Also, as our greenways grow, this is the person that will be sort of overseeing that part of our responsibilities. And then really have a point person for the new park development at Yergan Meadowbrook and anything that comes down the pike. We still have 2 other properties that we have to develop plans for. So that's the concept of how the work groups would be distributed. So how do we make this happen? We do have a vacant assistant director position that the proposal is to downgrade it from grade 30 to grade 28. Certainly update the scope of responsibilities, revise the job description, and do all that. We would have to create a new position of Superintendent of Parks and Nature. And I give you in grade 28, the existing grade, that's the salary range that particular grade has in the town's compensation plan. And then we have 2 other existing positions that we would want to upgrade the job descriptions, make it more cohesive, as well as make sure that they have a title that is consistent with this approach of superintendents. And again, right now we have 1 person that has that superintendent title, which is very, very common in the Parks and Recreation field, to have senior level positions carry that title. So none of this is free, I wish. There's some cost to the town, and I wanted to make sure that we just brought this to your attention as you consider these changes. For the supplemental positions, because there's so many and they have variable hours, variable rates, I wanted to sort of give you an idea of a percentage of cost increase. And the way I got to this number with our payroll team, our payroll staff was very helpful here. We looked at the number of supplemental hours that were in place between July and December of 2021. That's half a year. Then we looked at the existing hourly rates that the staff was paid. Using a spreadsheet and the magic of Excel, we adjusted if you adopted the proposed increase, if they worked the same number of hours, which again, it's a variable, the increase would represent about 25%. And if we carry that thinking to the next fiscal year, we would be looking at a 25% increase, which is about $122,000, give or take. And then, with more precision, it's much easier to calculate the cost of full-time positions. What you have on the left, on the left side is how our current year budget would look, or looks. We have about $116,000 in the budget for the assistant director position. That includes sort of a midpoint salary as well as the cost of benefits. If we split that into the downgraded position and a new position, we can certainly absorb the cost for this particular fiscal year. For next fiscal year, though, because it would be a totally new position, it would cost an estimated $97,000. And the little caveat here is that the benefit cost that I used to estimate fiscal year 23 is our current benefit cost. So as those change, that number may shift a little bit up or down. So that's the part of cost that I wanted to make sure that I brought to your attention. And with that, that's the end of this section. And any next steps is, first of all, get your feedback and support on which direction to go. We will make whatever job description and classification tweaks need to be done, collaborating with our HR department, and then update the budget as needed. And for the supplemental positions, we'll start initiating recruitment in February. Questions?
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sure there possibly are some. So, sort of in summary, I understand there will be a fairly immediate pay increase for supplemental employees, perhaps beginning in February, assuming the council signs off on that, and I'm pretty confident they will. But then the pay study will dictate some of these positions and/or the amount of rate that they will get as well. And that will come back to this council here. Okay, questions further for Maria? You have anything, Mr. Vance? Mr. Dellinger?
Yeah, the question, you outlined the changing of the levels. Is there an existing diagram that has the levels below those as well? Or is there another structure below?
No. And there's a reason for that, actually. I got that question. We sort of briefed the staff, our entire staff, on this concept to sort of get their feedback, and that was the question that was asked. And the reason why there is not is that I would really like to work with those superintendents to really work with the staff and work with them to figure out what is the best structure for their unit. I could certainly come up with, a complete org chart, but it feels that I will be doing this very top down, and I would really like to do this in collaboration with the staff as they are appointed.
That makes sense, because looking at like there's two that have like sort of tremendous growth ahead of them. And when I look at recreation and athletics and look at parks and nature specifically, like just looking what's on our plate and coming up, those are the level of responsibility, the managerial responsibilities and stuff, they're going to be growing. So I was curious to how that would evolve under the structure you have, so.
Yeah, I mean, again, I could certainly sort of, keep growing the chart, but I really wanted to again, sort of be very specific in working with the staff for their feedback, for their expertise, but it's also for, where I worked before, succession planning was a big topic, where part of what we really worked on was to make sure that our senior level staff was ready to step up into our positions. And learning about, how you manage personnel, how you sort of think about the structure of an organization, change management and all that. It's an important learning opportunity. So I really wanted that to be part of developing that relationship with my team members.
How does that process work with the compensation study that's going on, and knowing I'm the head of this work group, I know I need, based on my experience, this person under me handling this one under here, and then figuring out what their pay grades, are they going to be part of the conversation and establishing what those grades are and with the skill sets and workloads? Is that kind of the idea?
Well, the way we sort of work on compensation, I mean, all our positions are part of the town's classification. Anything that would be below the grade 28, all the positions will be part of the compensation study, I understand. So as we sort of wrap up that structure, all of the positions will be reviewed. To be very honest with you, that middle level of our department seems to be very solid in their job descriptions and compensation. We have great retention rates in those positions, which sort of gives you an idea that they're very competitive. So I don't, and field-wise, sort of compared to the industry, they just, again, seem to be very much in tune. But we certainly will work with HR on the compensation study to make sure that they're reviewed, and if there's any tweaks that need to be done, they'll be part of the bigger picture. The superintendents, we do have an existing one that it's a grade 28, so it has been through a process. And as we sort of kind of wrote the concept for the other positions, consulted with HR to make sure that was very much in tune with the requirements for that particular grade.
Mr. Dillon, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I like the idea of sort of creating these teams, and hopefully the kind of structure will even more empowers folks to, control and, oversee their areas, so they could.
Another way of answering that, though, is if the team is put in place, the team leadership's put in place, and they're determining that something is needed that doesn't exist today, an additional position or a reclassification of a position, we don't have to wait for the study to do that. HR, with all of our positions that are new or making significant changes, the hiring manager submits a new or a revised job description. HR manager evaluates that, compares it to the market, and makes a professional opinion of where it should slot into our organization. So we don't have to wait for the study to add resources that are identified that are needed or to make changes where there's good comparables. That can all be validated through the pay study later. So in addition to it being a good exercise for the superintendents, it doesn't cause them to wait around. Short of budget constraints, it doesn't cause us to have to wait for the study to make any of those changes or additions.
Ranger, anything? Okay. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Singleton.
Yes, Maria, on the sheet that shows the cost of the town, the supplemental positions, you showed a half year, and the number of hours worked is 13,869.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so all those hours were worked with the current employees, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if we adjusted the hourly rate, so the pay total, the 146 is what has been paid,
Yes.
was paid out, okay? That's the increase,
That
okay?
if we had paid them at the recommended increase, the 11, 12, 13, 14, same people, same number of hours, that would have added up to 183.
Okay, so
So-
question. We were told we were short on a bunch of supplemental positions, so what about the new positions that are gonna get filled?
Well, if you look at, this is half of the year, we're about 30% of our budget. That tells you that we had about 20% capacity. So between 146 and 453, oh, I should do the math. There's room for those additional positions to be hired. We have about, February, March, April, May, we have about 0.4 left of the year, give or take. So,
To fill,
yeah.
okay.
So we are confident again that we do have the resources, as well as hopefully we'll be able to be more successful in the recruitment process.
Okay.
With the increased
I was just trying to figure out if there weren't this many hours, that's what we paid, then if we're short all these other employees that we were supposed to pay, I was trying to figure out how we were short in the budget. Because if we paid out this much, but we're short a third of the employees, then
well, we
that
should
number, that would be a wash. The increase of 25% you can cover, that's what I was,
right. We should have been, I would say, at mid-year around 15,000 plus hours, maybe closer to 16. Just based on the typical sort of cycle of 1 month of summer, fall, and then sort of spring activities, the little lull in the winter, and then kind of start again.
okay, that's good. I appreciate you getting all this information together for us. I appreciate, I like the suggestions you made with the full-time positions, and, hey, you say on here, next steps whenever, if we like it, update budget as needed, so I think the council is probably all in favor of this taking effect whenever you want us to make it take effect.
Okay.
Mr. Singleton, I will just add, I think it's been implied, but I just want to make sure I state it, especially for the sake of any staff that's watching as well. I think it's obvious we're talking about a new starting salary for people coming on, but in the meantime, we will also be taking a look at all the folks that are currently on and making appropriate adjustments based on where they started. So I just want to make sure that, although I think it's implied, just stating that there will be a true-up process that'll be going on to evaluate the folks already on at a starting salary that was lower and doing some type of true-up. So that can be happening simultaneously to posting new jobs at the new rate.
Right.
Okay, anything else?
That'll definitely put out a lot of fires, absolutely. I guess it's a personnel matter, with the superintendent position. Is there a pathway to advancement from there? Are they stuck in that, or is the game plan that can be a superintendent for so many years on this section, then so many years if they want to move over to operations, for example, to learn?
Yeah, that's a very good point that you bring up, because one of the ideas, again, in sort of thinking about succession planning, is to at some point have the superintendents perhaps trade, So one person that has been in athletics for, say, 3 years could take on nature for 3 years. So their portfolio of responsibility changes, and the skills and experience that they acquire would sort of grow. Because again, it's important that at some point, I'm going to retire, and it would be nice if Rodney may fire me. So it would be nice for the department. Well, this is an edible state, right? So in that context, it will be important to, again, have staff that has that variety of expertise gained over years. And again, as our department grows, this is the structure that I think will address it for the next 5 years. But you just never know with the growth of Garner how fast the Parks Department may need to grow.
I'm sure it's going to happen. Plus, and then my thoughts were, again, with all the towns, not so many directors, and they retire from here and there, and much like the way you came here, if we do have a career path progression for these people, so it might not be here. It could be over at Apex. It could be somewhere out of state, but they know they're not stuck in a rut. I'm here for like 3 years, and I can shift over here, and at the end of it all, in so many years, I will have worked with all of it. And
absolutely. We want them to be highly competitive, and I don't want to lose them.
right.
But if they're poached and they get to sort of run, a bigger department, get paid more money, that's an interesting measure of success.
Okay. Good job, Council. Sure enough. I should mention to Maria, she's right. I do enjoy exercising in the park, but I've also discovered our walking track. I was over there this morning with my wife, who doesn't go too often, but it's a good place to jog on these cold winter days. And so I encourage folks to go there and take it in. There aren't that many people out there. I don't get there super early in the morning, but it's a nice facility, and I enjoy the track.
It is a lovely track, and outside we also see a lot of people walking around the multi-use field, particularly in the afternoon. So it's nice to have the indoor and the outdoor options for Garner residents.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we're ready to hear from Mr. Tony at this point in time. Mr. Beasley, our inspections director. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you tonight. 2 years ago, prior to COVID, we were scheduled for a big departmental update, but tonight we're just going to dwell on a small portion. I promise I'll be done before you need your 9 o'clock break.
All right. We might try to hold you to that.
All right.
Be careful.
Once again, I appreciate the opportunity to be before you tonight. Just a little bit of our department. Our mission statement, every time we get an opportunity to be before you, we like to remind you of that, is to make Garner the best place to live, work, visit by providing for the health, safety, and welfare of the residents through the enforcement of what we do, federal law, the North Carolina State building codes, and local ordinances. We have 4 divisions. We have building codes, we have fire, maintenance inspections, we have code enforcement, which is all our nuisance, and then we have our permitting and front staff, which over the years has taken on a more robust role. It's always been an important role, but because of a lot of the changes in rules and regulations, been more placed on them for what they have to do at that front desk level. Our sort of structure for us, within this, you'll see some things in just a second. I'll thank you again, but that's our divisions, and you can see under what I'm going to concentrate on tonight, which is building codes. We have 5 full-time field officers, and we have a part-time person in that division. And we have a supervisor who's our chief code enforcement officer, who's retiring in April after 30 years with the town. So, we're going to fix the deal with our second retirement recently, but this one's a 30-year employee of the town. How we look at workload and capacity for inspections is really important, because people think, well, hey, there's 2,080 hours in a work year. Well, there's really not. If you look at it, there's 228 days of average availability, which is roughly about 1,824 hours. That's after you take out all the holidays that are there. We look at how many hours they need to spend a day with prep, doing load work, computer work, getting done. And then what's left is the hours we have to allocate inspections to. Our insurance rating last year, we got a little bit better rating, which was our 5-year average, just like the fire department did, but it's all based on statistics. ISO for our state average says that we shouldn't do more than about 13 a day. They recommend 10. So that puts about 1,850 inspections per field inspector during a year. So, you know, with their maximum, if you're on the 13 in, around 2,400 inspections a year. So I'm going to start out with permits issued. You get your monthly reports from our publisher that shows all the permits and their values, but I've got a slide towards the end that I'll tie in, then I'll address some of the questions. But if you look back from 17 up until about 2019, we had a big jump in 17, 18, but we were averaging around 12 to 1,300 permits a year for a little bit. Then 2020, you see the first jump to 1,621. 2021, we had a record year last year, and this is physical budget years, not calendar years. So that's the reason I did my slides based on budget years and not calendar years. So we did 1,929 permits last year. So far, in the first 2 quarters of 2022, we've already done 1,151 through December 31st. So we're trending right now to be another record year on permitting. But how does that look? Councilman Dellinger had asked a couple of meetings back about trying to look at some comparisons. So what I did is I broke it out by quarter from 2020 budget year to now. And so what you can see by quarter, and I'll explain a little bit of the spike in this timeline in just a second, but if you look at it, you know, you can see the top totals are total permits by quarter. So we were averaging 400, around 400. Then in fiscal year 2021, second quarter, you see it sort of spike, around 500 again, then a little bit higher. So overall, about 500 permits a quarter. Is sort of how it's running, and that's a good, it's a solid workload because of what goes into things. But what drives that workload is when you look at the other 2 bars. So what I broke it out by single family dwellings and townhouses, because you've been seeing a lot of subdivision projects and townhouse projects. And the question's always been, how much product do we have and how much are we permitting? So if you go back in early 2021, fiscal year 20, single family dwellings were running around 75, 80 a month, pretty steady. You know, fourth quarter of 20, a little bit of a drop. Townhouses, you were seeing 15, sort of 6. You see that little steady mark. And the most townhouses we've done has been 58, and that was in this last quarter, second quarter of 2022. But you'll see a high spike in houses. And so if you look at single family dwellings, even though we had a pretty good spike in second quarter 21, at the end of 2022 this year, the first and second quarter, you see a huge spike in single family dwellings. That spike came in, which was an unprecedented set of that 148 permits and that 173 permits is full plan reviews, applications that get reviewed by us and planning. And we have to make sure everything's all right and then get through the process. Well, what happened was the state of North Carolina adopted a new electrical code that was going to be originally effective October 1st, and it had a huge impact on single-family residential construction, cost-wise. So all of our tract builders, even though they might not have needed part of these house permits yet to actually start because they weren't selling, or they were selling but they didn't, they inundated us with massive amounts of plans for subdivisions so that they would be in the door before the October 1st deadline. Then the state changed that deadline to November 1st, and then in the middle of that, they realized that the General Assembly had made a rule 3 years ago that they couldn't adopt any new codes that affected the cost of single-family residential or townhouses in North Carolina until 2024. So now in North Carolina, we have 2 electrical codes. We have the 2017 electrical code that's applied to single-family residential and townhouses only, and we have the 2020 National Electric Code that is effective for apartments, condos, and all commercial. So all of our field inspectors now have to remember they're working out of 2 codes. So that's sort of what caused that spike when y'all saw in your monthly reports like a huge spike in single-family dwellings, because we didn't see that as big a spike in COs for those same periods. And we're still seeing solid CO in sales. Don't take me wrong on that, but that's sort of what happened there, and you saw that. It didn't really, the townhouse, if you notice, they really didn't increase as much because most folks weren't worried about townhouse. They were worried about them single-family tract subdivisions. So, the good thing is we have a lot of permits out there that are issued right now, and they all paid our parking fee of and all the fees. But, they'll be built as fast as they can get them sold. But that was the reason we had such a high spike over the 60 or 70 a month, which is a little bit more manageable to what has given us just a massive stress level for a lot of my permitting staff and our plan review staff in the last quarter of the year this year. And it sort of carried over a little bit. I mean, they're still coming in.
A question.
Yes, sir.
And there's a statutory time frame that you have to do those too, isn't that correct?
Yeah, and I've got that on a slide, and then I'll answer any other questions specifically on that. So then we looked at building inspections conducted. So if you go back to 2017, we were doing about 7,800 inspections that year. And then 2018, we shot up to 11,000 inspections. So I'm going to back up one slide. So if you looked at, when I said that 2018, this one chart didn't do it. Let me back up one more, I'm sorry. If you looked at the permits, 2018 is when we shot up like 300, almost 400 permits that year. And then you saw our inspections jump way up also. And part of the reason, and I got 2 slides at the end which really paints a beautiful picture of what happens, but these are new single-family dwellings and townhouses. And in state law, we have so many required inspections minimum for each single-family dwelling. So for each house, you got a footing, a foundation, a site plan, a waterproofing, floor framing, insulation, siding, rough ends, electrical, plumbing, mechanicals. They'll call you for a roofing. They'll call you for a flashing. One good thing about Garner, and hopefully the council hears on a regular basis, I hear it about our staff and I hear it from all the tract builders. They'd all wish they could take our inspection department, our team in our town, and go wherever they're at, because we work with them, we cooperate with them, we keep them in line with the code, but we provide excellent customer service. We absolutely do. And I'll hold our team against anybody in the state of North Carolina for that reason. And we hear it on a regular basis. But you can see the growth. 2019, you saw the growth in permits, and you see the amount of inspections. 2020 and 2021 provided just record numbers for us. And, forget all the plan review that my plan reviewer has to do for residential, me for commercial, but our field teams were there. And this is during COVID. That's the reason part of my note that they put on the agenda was COVID related. When COVID hit, people thought the country was going to shut down. And instead, for us, fortunately, in the market we were in, our residential sales skyrocketed. And at the same time, everybody was doing home repairs because everybody was at home. So we never saw any downturn. And we were fortunate that we reorganized and reworked the way we worked. That we haven't, even though we've had staff that has had to be out with COVID over the 2-year period, we haven't lost any major functions because of the way we're operating. Nobody's intermingling with each other for that. But you can see the amount of inspections. Well, what I wanted to show you was just the first 6 months, the first 2 quarters of this 22 year, we've already done 14,202 inspections. I mean, we're not seeing any slowdown.
What are you projecting?
It's hard to say, honestly. So what I did is I said, hey, I'm going to go back and look at it by quarter, like I was just saying before. You know, so you see, we've been averaging sort of like the permits. You know, we were averaging about, 400 permits a quarter. We were averaging about 5,000 inspections a quarter. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 quarters, we did 6,000. And then last quarter, 600 inspections the very last quarter of the year. And that's with holidays and everything else. I mean, it's gotten, our market, this shows me my market, that we're not slowing down and people are still building and we're still doing things. So I have data in our database. It's an Excel database. We have to create our own kind of reports, but I wanted to give you a 16-year window and show you how this picture paints a great picture for us. So in 2005, which is where my data starts, this is the number of permits. So 2005 and 6, and I came here in 2006, so Eagle Ridge was in its final days of its final year and a half of building out. You had just finished Bingham Station and the stuff out at off Bryan Road. So you can see the growth that we had, and you can see the number of permits. And I'm going to track permits separate from inspections, and I'll explain why in a second, because of what new construction does compared to just maintenance work. So you see, we're doing 05, 06, 1,200, and then this recession hit in 07, really started in 08, but it really paints a different picture on the inspection side, but on permits, we never dropped below 800 permits in any one given year. Because people still have to change out heat and air units that are going bad. People still want to remodel a little bit inside, even in a bad economy. They might not can build new, but they were doing. So, that's sort of paints that picture. And then you notice that due to one of the previous councils, they were wondering why we weren't seeing a lot of the growth that had already started in 2011 and 2012. The town itself and the council made some policy changes in how we treated both sewer allocations, type 1 and 2 housings. They met with a lot of developers and said, why aren't you doing things in Garner? And y'all made some policy changes. And here's how you can tell the policy change made a difference. Those policy changes took place in 2013-14, and then you start looking at 14-15, we took a 400, almost 500 jump in permits. And then we have been at the 1,300 range until 18, and then we went to 15, and we haven't dropped yet. So last year, like I said, a record year, 1,900 permits. And then the first 6 months, already 1,151 permits. So we've done, in 6 months now, the same number of permits we did in 2005 and 6 when Garner thought it was seeing the most rapid growth it had had pre-recession. That's what this picture paints for us. Then I said, well, how does it look on the inspection side? So this is the same window for inspections. So you can see during the Eagle Ridge and Bingham Station, 2005, 6, and 6 and 7, because you still had that carryover as the recession was getting ready to start, we were doing 12,000 inspections a year. Then the recession started, we dropped to 8 as everybody was finishing up everything they could, and then we sort of plateaued out. The lowest was 3,500 in 2010, but you were sitting at that 4,000 to 5,000 range. And like I said earlier, new construction requires a lot more trips than the little maintenance and the indoor remodels and the change outs and upgrade my services, closing my garage. So even though the inspection levels dropped, when you saw those permit levels staying pretty steady, they didn't quite increase as much. The number of inspections dropped more because of the type of construction taking place. Policy changes hit, as we said, you start to see 2014, 15, 16, then you look at 2016, 17, we went from 5,000 to 7,000, and we haven't had a dip since because of all the new construction that's been taking place in Garner. And like I said, last year we had a record 19,000, but the first 6 months of this fiscal year, we've already done 14,000 inspections. You know, how does that sort of look? You know, part of our problem is our statistics don't reflect multiples in apartments because it ain't software right now. So if I send somebody out to do a rough-in on a 24-unit apartment building today, that's one rough-in, not 24 rough-ins, but he or she has to go in 24 units. So our numbers are skewed a little bit on the lower side because of some of the apartments we have, but that's just, you know, is my reflection as a director when I'm looking at my workload. You know, then like I said, 19,256 last year. Once again, it doesn't take into account the multiples that you have when you see a rough-in on a 24-unit or 48-unit apartment building. Our ISO daily average that I mentioned earlier is 65 to 84, 228 days. So our department should be doing somewhere between 14,000 and 19,000 inspections based on the number of inspectors we have. And you can see we're pushing that. And like I said, in the first half of 2022, we've already done 14,202. You know, we're stretched. We're doing everything we can to keep that great customer service level. You know, hopefully, as we continue to see growth, you know, we're poised to handle solid, steady growth, but not super growth, you know, which right now we're working on 2 apartment projects that are getting ready to come out of the ground. You're going to have Tarrant out off 401, which is huge, and then we're going to have Timber Drive up past the end. That project's fixing to come out of the ground very shortly, but you see it, and that's what we have. And if my next slide doesn't, nope, it doesn't. Let me back up one real quick. So answer Councilman Dellinger, the state mandates that we have to, I took out some slides. I originally was going to talk about our whole department, and then John and Rodney said, well, let's just sort of concentrate on the questions that Councilman Dellinger had. Plus they know I could go on forever about everything we do. So I took my 60 slides and made it down to 16. But the state mandates that we have to perform all inspections within 2 days, residential inspections within 2 days, by law.
When you say all inspections, Tony, you mean electrical, plumbing?
Any
this, that, and the
trade,
other?
if you call in today and say, I want a footing,
Okay.
I have 48 hours to make that inspection. We typically provide a 98 to 99% next day inspections, unless we have somebody out sick. Very seldom do we roll anybody. Now, last Friday, we rolled 61 inspections to Monday. We still made 6 inspections Friday because we had some people that needed gas for heat. And so we made a few essential inspections because the weather permitted it, but we rolled everything because the town was closed. So myself and another inspector were essential personnel. We were here all day that day, Friday. But on Monday, we did like 90 inspections. We had those 60, and then we had already told people they would be scheduled to Tuesday, and then anybody that didn't have a utility, we added them on to Monday anyhow. So, you know, that takes some thinking when you're working through it, but it's a 2-day mandate for that. And, you know, we're fortunate so far we've been able to do all that. And I want to thank the council again, because during COVID, y'all allowed us to convert a position full-time on our building inspection side that took us 5 months to fill. We had a retirement that took us 4 months to fill. And now we're fixing to have a second retirement, and we're at our maximum peak growth. But I truly, I mean, I am humbled, and my staff will tell you if I'd had them out here, they appreciate y'all giving us the resources that we've needed to try to stay ahead of the growth or stay caught up with the growth. And then on plan review, what a lot of people don't realize, the state mandates that we do residential plan review within 10 days. No matter what. If they bring in their application day, 10 days later, I'm supposed to have it ready for them to pick up. If not, they can be deemed to start construction. When the General Assembly changed that on residential, that's what they did. You can choose not to do residential plan review in North Carolina because it's not you can't charge for residential plan review, so we don't charge for it. So, but it's not required. But if you do it, you have 10 days. But I can tell you the time we spend reviewing 173 house permits and write notes for things that are wrong or ask them to correct saves us well beyond that. Because if not, and you were a field inspector going out to a framing, you're going to be sitting there trying to do the plan review first to even figure out if there's anything right or wrong. So you might be there 2 hours trying to look at plans before you could start your inspection. And now, instead, we do that up front. And all the municipalities in Wake County do residential plan review. I'm not saying it that we do it and we're different than anybody else. We all do it for that reason. But that's where we are. It's not what you expect that produces results, it's what you inspect. These two pictures are actually Garner projects. The one on the left was at Greenfield North. This is the Amazon distribution center, delivery center's parking lot near where the bus stop was going in. And it's things we catch. You know, the plans didn't show it this way, but there is a curb cut and it's got truncated yellow on it. And if you noticed, it doesn't go down to the pavement. You know, one person looked at it and one person didn't, and then, you know, asphalt and concrete people do what they want to do. So that's something we caught. You know, if you go out there now, that's nice and smooth right down. You can go straight across the road and it meets the ADA requirements that we do. The one picture on the right was very interesting in the fact that this came from an HOA complaint about a new deck. They had repaired their deck without a permit. They had added an outdoor water heater, and it's not approved as an outdoor water heater. That's supposed to be inside of a room or closet. But it's also in front of the electrical meter. It's in front of the gas meter and all that. But I mean, this is something we caught we had to fix. But these are just things that you see that you don't think about. And elsewhere in North Carolina, I'm on a, like I said, I appreciate the opportunity y'all allow me to serve as a board of directors member on ICC Region 8 to represent North Carolina. And we're North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. And we meet quarterly and we do training and things with the codes. But we have a blog page called Code Geeks for ICC Region 8. And so these two pictures are recent pictures that were posted. The one on the left was actually Western North Carolina. It was in Davie County. They put the wrong house on the lot. And that's the reason the concrete for the flat works based on what the plat shows for that house, but they put the wrong lot there. Since then, I know that house, I've been by it. They put the garage on the end, had to relocate the air conditioner into service. They made it a side load garage. But the other two came out of outside Helen, Georgia. Ringo McCullum had posted these. He went to a subdivision and there's 3 houses. You got the picture of the 2 driveways. And even though it looks like it goes straight at that angle to the bottom of the door, he said it was a 4-foot flat spot in front of the garage doors. It's not a code violation. I mean, I wouldn't want to get in it or get out of it. So, you know, if we do our job, hopefully nothing happens. And in there, somebody might not have looked at elevations. I have no earthly idea, but that picture was posted about a week and a half ago on our group blog that we look at odd and eclectic things, and I thought that gave you a little bit of insight sometimes into the best planning don't always work, no matter what it does. So with that, I'll answer any questions you got. And if you think that this slide, if this is what y'all are wanting to see a little bit more of, I mean, we can start including that quarterly in part of your updates that you get from Colleen with the number of permits that are done each month. You know, and if there's a different category, you know, or something, but typically since we're seeing and y'all are looking at projects that typically are townhouses or single family dwellings, I thought that was the breakout, Councilman Dellinger, that you sort of asked about. And it sort of gave you an idea in what we see. And the gap between those numbers and out of the 582, we have our commercial permits, any renovations, any electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and all the rest. So, you know, we have so many categories, it would be confusing to try to break it out too much more. But if you had anything specific I would do, I'll answer any questions you have. And if this is a slide that you would like to keep as a rolling slide, that we just keep updating it as the quarters go, 1 quarter a drop off and the next quarter comes on. I mean, if y'all give me direction, that's what we'll put in your packets.
Okay, Mr. Beasley, you almost made your goal there at 9 o'clock, but no, that's fine.
That was a short time frame
Yeah,
for me
you
this
know,
time.
those are some rather stark graphs that jump out at you there in terms of the numbers, and that certainly does give us a a bullseye view of the growth that is taking place. So, Council, what are your questions for Mr. Beasley? I'll start with Ms. Behringer if she has any.
Mr. Beasley, if you could have increased staff and no restrictions, how many new positions would you need?
That is a very loaded question because I have my budget team in here. We have retirements. I mean, let me answer it two ways, first of all. At our current growth, we probably, in our 5-year plan, and you could see out there was a plan reviewer already for next fiscal year in the 5-year plan. But with us adding software, we're probably looking at needing a permit clerk on the front end because of what's all required for us to do COs for the banks, closings, the number of COs they develop, all that paperwork, and we're just truly behind on a lot of our scanning to get things digitally saved. So we're probably one of the largest purveyors of storage space down there right now because we haven't had time to get all that done, just meeting the daily limits. You know, we have a retirement. We're going to have to fill that position. If we keep seeing growth, most likely we'll have to ask for another field inspector. And then, you know, I have a permit clerk retiring the next year and myself. So still tentatively for 23. So, you know, we're still looking at it. You know, I'm one that I'm old school. I want to push everybody to their limits. But if we need the help, y'all have always allowed me to come before you, and y'all have given us what we've asked for to meet the needs. And right now, you know, we're sitting on that seesaw looking at all this, and then we'll work with our budget team and decide if we need anything that's outside the budget process. But I would most likely still go through the budget process. But you know, we're like everybody else in the region right now. We're all doing backstrokes and butterflies to try to stay on top of the water. And we've got a lot of retirements in Wake County in all of our towns, and we know they're all going to have some openings. We're on the Q board session today, and there's over 200 and some inspectors that can retire this month. And so the state's still looking at that too on each month right now. For the next couple months, they have over 200 that are 65 years or older with 30 years of service that are still working. So.
Mr. Singleton.
That's Mr. Dellinger, because he had one of the charts. Go ahead and get
Okay,
him.
yeah, all right, we'll go that way. Mr.
Somebody
Dellinger.
wants me to speak. I'll speak.
I'm sure you'll ask some questions, so I'm not worried
Not
about
really.
Can you meet that 9 o'clock time?
I can talk till 9.
I know.
No, I just want to say, in all seriousness, if you have more slides, I really want you to come back for the next work session and continue to talk, because I'm curious, and this data and the way it's presented gives us a glimpse of what the trajectory is. And I wish we had similar information for the number of COs that are issued and that kind of stuff, and like in a chart right there in front of us, and then we can project out. So I like the data. I like how it's not too detailed. Like you say, you can't pull out every single type of inspection, but that's not necessary to see the trend. And the trend is tremendous. I mean, even looking at this year with the inspections conducted at 14,000, halfway through the year, you're probably going to end the year over 20 easily. And so it helps us see that, and it's not slowing, as you've said. So I
appreciate the opportunity to come back. All I would have covered on the others would have been our overgone lots and given that division some kudos, and same thing with our fire inspection. So, you know, honestly, I defer all that to my management team of when I come back with any of the rest of my slides. But I'll add a category of COs in our chart just so you can see how they delay. Yep. You know, like I'll add one more bar beside those quarters for COs issued. I'll work with Eric and IT to make sure I can scan that data because, like I said, ours is an access database. that some fields are searchable and some aren't necessarily sometimes, but I'll look at that and see. Because David Banford tracks our CO dates, and we can just add that as a column on that one slide for y'all.
We'll queue them up when there's a work session that's not so heavy.
Thank you for all this.
Mr. Dellinger, one of the examples I think that you cited that we looked at with, I think, Fuquay, one of the things that they also report in a report that might have been one of the ones you were looking at was permit values. We did not replicate that because, as Tony can tell you more about, those values are very subjective and depending on who's assigning them, there's nothing that mandates someone assign a value that's actually reflective of what they're doing. And so we don't see those as being a real good indicator of anything. So we just wanted to, we acknowledged that it was there, but we left it out purposely because Tony can tell you those are, we've got some of the valuations. If you ever look at that report, that's a single family house that they're saying the value is, $100,000 and it's going to sell for $400 when it's built.
And that's not as important as the raw numbers of houses going up. So.
Right. And to clarify that for you, though, Mr. Andre, and what John said is correct. We don't charge, all of our residential permits are based on square footage of the houses. We chose years ago not to do values because nobody wants to give you their true contracts and they won't tell you what they cost at the end on residential. On our commercial, when we switch to live applications, we're doing online applications, and that's the last thing I will make. During COVID, we rolled out live virtual remote inspections, and we still do that on a daily basis to help meet the needs of the community. I had mentioned that one time before, so we still do that, and it's on our thing. And then we implemented an online scheduling for those live remotes, but we also have our field inspectors, their daily workload's all online now, and any day they can go see it, and the contractor can call them up because their phone number is online. They know who their inspector is, and they help work. That's our customer service. That's how we help work to meet some of their time needs. But so residential values have never been worth anything because Wake County assigns their own value anyhow, and what the contractor tells you doesn't matter. So John is totally correct. Our commercial values are close now. They were always pretty close. Even though we didn't get contracts, but now we've got these new forms and they have to break it out more. And and only one example, real quick, we had one that had used our old forms, had submitted back in September, and the project they never came in, and after they got through the plan review, they never came in. They came in about middle of January and said, hey, we're ready. We want to go ahead and bring you your check for, it was about $14,000, and we said, sorry, I need your new applications. I said, we don't use those forms anymore. Here's your new forms. And we added a lot more lines of required data, includes contract amounts and different subs that they might be using. And his permit ended up being almost $19,000. And his value of his project was about $120,000 higher. And we've been seeing that on most of our commercial projects, that if we had them in review before and now they're using the new forms, that the values have drastically increased because they're now signing a little affidavit to their pricing on commercial.
Okay. You good? Mr. Vance?
Yes, very detailed report from my standpoint, great information. One term was used as COs, and for my clarification and possible for the audience, what is a CO?
Okay, so a CO typically in normal slang terms for anybody else in business terms is a certificate of occupancy. And that basically means you now can move in and go close at the attorney's office for closing. And that's what all of our builders want, is COs for closings. It's a little bit of an anomaly, and my 1 minute of education is the state building code does not actually recognize a certificate of occupancy. It says that when somebody builds a house or a commercial building, the only thing I have to issue is a certificate of compliance, which means they've met all the conditions of the building codes. But a certificate of occupancy is a document that people use to say you've met whatever other standards are required by that government unit to be able to more formally occupy and use that space. Other than that, the only place occupancy is listed is in the fire code, where just like we have to post an occupancy for any assembly space.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Let's see, going here. Mr. Singleton.
Tony, thank you for all the information. You mentioned the 5-year plan of a position for an additional plan reviewer at the front desk, a full-time position, I'm assuming.
Yes, sir.
And you also, in some of your positions here, you have the part-time, the half-time positions, part-time positions. Do you see any of those being bumped up to a full-time position in any of those three positions, or an additional position that you may need?
I would say that, first of all, I never foresee us not having a supplemental position to allow you to fill a gap in a crisis mode, no matter what. As we keep adding commercial properties, we're going to be to a point where we might need another full-time fire inspector on the fire side because of all the fire maintenance inspections. Our current fire maintenance load equals the one person that y'all gave us full-time. But we still have so much new construction for Paul. We have finally got our second supplemental fire. We've got our supplemental fire person filled now. The person that worked for the town for about 30 years. He retired from where he was at before. And then eventually it just hasn't worked out for him to come back and help us anymore. The management team allowed me to go ahead and hire a second supplemental. We got them on board in October, and they're doing a great job helping us catch up on our maintenance inspections. The part-time, our supplemental building inspector, he's mainly doing live remotes, but if somebody's out, he comes in and does change outs. I hope the man lives to be 100, but he's in his late 70s now. But he's doing a great job for us. So, you know, we feel that that's probably a position we always need hours for, no matter what. If we continue to see the trends we're having now, later in the year after we fill the vacancy from the retirement, then we'll have more data. I mean, it's just, as you saw, it was an unprecedented little bit of a spike, and I sort of want to make sure. But we are at our ISO threshold sort of for what our staff could do and feel like they can do adequately to make sure that we're not missing something that puts anybody in harm's way.
Okay, Phil, anything?
I like those numbers. That paints a picture of kind of where we're going. It's an eye-opener, and especially as you break it down by for type housing it is. And I don't know how you could do it with the condos or apartments, just to give you a realization.
I mean, we could list apartment buildings, but part of that problem is and I admit it, is the consistency of how that data was entered in the permit application because of the way the software was. Because we field, when the permits come in for like apartments, they have to pick the number of units. So they'll pick a multifamily building of more than 5 units, but they might code it as commercial because technically it's supposed to be commercial. But the next time the permit clerk, because of habit, it's residential apartments, they code it as residential, so they don't always show up where they need to. That's a little bit more difficult, and it's part of the data cleanup that we will do as we convert to our software, and then in the future, hopefully we'll have that cleaned up. But right now, I have no staff time that I could assign to clean up that data. We've been cleaning up other data, but that's just one of those categories that I know it's captured, and I've got it in 5 places, and that's sort of where we are with that.
I know with the new building over here, a lot of your group's going to go over that way, and I'm with Gray on this. You know, amount of growth. Let's don't get ourselves behind, because when you're a lap down, it's tough catching up.
And I'll take that to heart with my budget managers over here.
I'm sure they'll be very cooperative.
Okay, thank you all. I know
Thank y'all again.
A lot of information to take in, Tony. Thank you very much for and you were the last one, so you were patiently waiting, or at least you were waiting. So thank you very much. I'm going to declare about a 10-minute recess, and we'll come back and finish up the agenda. I think we can do it before too long, but is 10 minutes enough for you? Okay. Thanks again, Tony. Be in recess until about 25 till 9. So try to be back in 10 minutes if you will. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Rick said you could go.
Okay. Okay, I'll gavel us back into session after a recess, and we're pretty close to the end of our agenda, so I'm going to recognize our town manager for his report at this time.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, see, there was one thing listed in the agenda.
Groundhog Day.
Yes, Groundhog Day is the one item that's listed in here, February the 2nd at White Deer Park. I believe at 10 o'clock start?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the time, so.
Yeah, I think I had 10 o'clock in a previous agenda, but it's listed on our website. So we will be doing that. The other item that I wanted to give you an update on was the Garner Grows process and project that we're working with the group, a private nonprofit group called Garner Grows. And staff had a meeting last week, and then we followed that up yesterday with the meeting, a Teams meeting with their group, about, I think it was 5 of them on. And so just kind of tell you where we all are with that. So from the various aspects, I'm going to tell you kind of where we are. So on the planning side, our planning director had conversations with their architect. It's been a couple of months. I think he's refining some of the drawing details, but they are to have a meeting on Thursday. They're trying to meet the February 4th deadline for the site plan submission. So they're working toward that, and I think he felt confident that they could do that. One thing, because it's town property, I will be the official applicant, although their group is going to be doing all of the plans and filling out the applications, but technically I'll be signing all of those, similar to the process we use for the historic depot, since it is our property, and we're doing a site modification. So that's what we're waiting for, that submission of the site plan modification by Garner Grows. The way that project, the size of the project and complexity of it, that will be a staff level review and approval. It will go through the technical review committee for comments, just like any other project, commercial type project. But that will be a staff level review. So just want to make sure you know that. We can, show you the site plan and let you look at it before it gets approved and all those type of things. But technically it'll be approved at the staff level. Could take, up to 2 months or so, depending on the review comments and how quick they respond to those comments and make revisions if there's any that need to be made. Okay, on the public works side, a water line extension is required from the front of the property all the way to the back of Thompson Park, where the garden will be. So we will be hooking an underground pipe up to a water meter. It'll be metered separately. The infrastructure cost to put that pipe in will be roughly $3,500. The garden group has asked if that would be something the town would cover, the cost of that. I think that would be reasonable, because that will be a permanent pipe in the ground of the infrastructure, would stay with the park. However, the Garner Groves would pay the monthly utility bill for the usage of the water, because that will be on a meter. So the town council would need to give me permission, make the decision whether you would like to cover that, or if you would like for the garden group to cover that $3,500 estimate.
You want that now? I mean,
Sure, if you want to have any conversations about it, or
I have a
think
question. Is there
Yep.
like a draft agreement that is kind of going back and forth too, that would include that sort of as part of it? Because that's what I'm curious to see,
Yeah.
what the sort of relationship would
Yeah,
be.
I'll get to that, some of the lease terms. We reviewed the lease, but we can't give our final comments until we see the site plan. So, yeah, they do understand that, but we did talk about some of those things. Okay, I'll continue on, and then at the end, we'll go back to that. Okay, so the other question is how best to handle the garbage. We had a really good conversation about that. I think our Public Works has worked out something that will work for the garden group. We do have garbage cans out there, and of course they can use it for their water bottles and paper and all of that regular kind of garbage. But from time to time, they're going to generate garbage that's not the typical type of thing we would see in our park. So they might have some vegetation, or as they're pulling weeds or doing whatever they're doing, or have crates and bags and pots and things like that. So they are going to work it out that, approximately 3 times a year, we'll do a special pickup for the group and give them some type of charge for that. They had proposed that they would just pay a hauler, like our hauler, to pick up a rollout every week or whatever, but we don't think that's really practical because of the location of where the rollouts would be and having to maybe possibly take them to the front, or either the truck having to unlock the gate and go through the gate, so we don't really think that's the most practical. For the most part, they can put their things in the garbage bins that are there, and we'll pick those up like we normally do and empty them, and then we'll work out the special pickups. We had some discussion about, this is an athletic park that you're putting a garden accessory use in, so we will need to continue to maintain the athletic field in the way we've been maintaining it. So they may have more of an organic type process, and we do use chemicals and herbicides and pesticides, and they were understandable of that, and we would be careful not to harm any plants, but we do have licensed chemical pesticide users. They have their license, so we'll be looking out for their stuff when we use those. From the Parks and Rec side, one of the things that we need to do as we look through the potential, the lease, is to define the partnership and how that will benefit the town. And so they're going to be working with Parks and Rec director about what are some things they can offer to the public. It is a membership group. However, there's going to be probably some education that they can offer, maybe some classes, some clinics. One of the things they do is they do donate a portion of the yield of vegetables or fruit or whatever they grow to charity. So that'll be part of it. They plan to share their business plan with us. One of the things we wanted to make sure is in the design of the park or of the garden is that they maintain pedestrian access. So we'll be working with their architect on that. We'll likely, and I could talk to Councilmember Dellinger, but this they may want to run this by the Parks Advisory Committee just for their comment before anything is officially approved. Just as a group, they may want to see that. All right, on the legal and admin side, we'll likely do a resolution like we did for the depot again, which is kind of a model. It's not an exact model, not an exact fit, but there are some pieces of it that fit. And so we'll do a resolution that would come to council that talks about the public purpose of the garden being on public property. So that resolution will spell that out, and we'll get the council to approve that resolution prior to the project being approved. And then one thing we talked about was the lease period. They need enough time to make it worthwhile, to get everything going. However, in doing some research, we couldn't go as long as what they were proposing. They had proposed 10 years. That's not allowable. But what we would propose is 3 years with 2 3-year renewals as an example. So that would allow it for us to give us a chance to see how it works out, but also renew it enough times where it would give them enough time to establish the garden, because it takes more than one season to really get it going. The site plan needs to be done before we can finalize the lease, so we can respond to the official layout. And they had talked about development fees, permit fees, those type of things. And since it's on town property, we're not going to charge any fees because of the public purpose. So that's the discussion we had with them. Their schedule, we talked about their schedule. They likely will not get a spring planting, and they do understand that. They know right now the goal is to get the site plan approved and then to start the infrastructure. This spring, they'll look to till the grass and kill the Bermuda that's out there. They may possibly plant some plants in April, but more than likely, they'll probably shoot for either summer or fall plantings, but they've got to build planter boxes and till up the soil and amend the soil and those type of things, so that takes time. So they seem pretty agreeable to the things we talked about and the schedule, and there is a lease, and we have marked it up and talked about some of those things in here, but before we show that to you, it needs a little work and a little bit of some of the statements about what they may offer up to the public, and we need to know what their business plan is as part of that. And with that, I'll see if, Attorney Jones has anything to add from the legal side.
I just wanted to clarify about the term of the lease. They had asked for, I believe, a 10-year initial term with renewable 5 years. Under state law, anything over a year has to be approved by council. And, well, there's two issues. One, on the term, you look at the total, including the renewals, and if it's 10 years or more, it has to be treated as a disposition or a sale of property, which means it would likely have to go out to an upset bid. You can structure them in certain ways, but then there's no guarantee that Garner Groves would be the successful bidder in that situation. The other caveat is generally the lease of any town property has to be at a fair rental value because it is taxpayer supported. And that's why a public purpose is crucial to this. If there's a public purpose, then we don't have to collect that lease payment. And, it may be difficult to figure out what a fair rental value would be for an acre, of flat land, but it could be calculated. So we want to make sure that we meet the state law requirements in order to do this kind of public-private partnership that's in a rental type lease arrangement.
And the Parks and Rec Director, Maria Munoz Blanco, she has some experience in working with community gardens, so she's going to be working with the group on defining what would be beneficial through the Parks and Rec Cultural Resources programming.
So what I understand, the initial lease we'll start with is a 3-year lease subject to two renewals. Is that right? Is that what I heard earlier?
That's what I'm proposing, yes.
Okay. All right. I just want to clarify that. Anything else?
No.
Anything else from you? Okay.
Now, did you want to add anything on this item, John? I know you got a couple of others, but
Okay.
Rachel.
Council, any questions? I want to go back and I guess get clarification on the $3,500 cost to install the pipe. But Mr. Vance or Mr. Dellinger down this, anybody got questions in regards to this presentation?
Just a couple. First, appreciate your attention on it. I know they do too. One is it still possible, and this wouldn't go to the public use in what we're talking about, but for this to be considered as part of a historical offset for Jurgen, is that still something that's for the agricultural, historical, or is that something?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. I haven't.
We don't know. If we don't know, we don't know.
With
Yeah.
SHPO, I hate to venture a guess as to anything that they
Okay.
might would count, but it's a good idea. I just would hate to venture a
I just
guess.
want to make sure that's still on our radar, so even if it doesn't help with this particular lease situation, at least it's something we keep at the forefront. I like the 3-year with the renewals. The other, in the lease where there'll be pretty specific guidelines on the public programs and assessment and clear terms for termination, because I think that's really important for accountability, is to make sure everybody's upholding their end of things. I don't want, the town into a situation where it's not working and we don't, there aren't good metrics to, make sure everybody's upholding their part of the agreement. So
Yeah, we'll have a termination clause on both sides. So yeah.
Right, and we've also asked for an operational plan, so there's a clear understanding of what activities they'll be doing and when they'll be on there, and the level of maintenance, or, for want of a better word, how aesthetically it looks, that it's kept up, that would be incorporated into the lease. So we don't have that piece fleshed out at this point.
Do you have anything, Mr. Vance? Mr. Singleton, Mr. Matthews, okay. All right.
One quick question. We talked about earlier about would they be installing some type of fence around it? Well, I reckon we're waiting until after they build it and get it there.
They do plan to install a fence, I believe, on 3 sides. I don't think they're going to install it on the back near the wooded side, but on the other 3 sides, they would install a fence.
The vegetables gonna get eat up.
I was gonna say, if you leave it on the backside, they will clean that and mow it to the ground. Let me tell you from personal experience.
Right. Well, that's just what I was told, so I'm not sure.
Be a great another deer park.
They're experienced, so I figure they'll do what they feel is effective. So.
Yeah, that was their call, I guess, right? On the fence.
Yeah, that's what someone mentioned on the call yesterday, so I haven't gotten clarification on whether that's going to be the case or not, but we'll talk through that.
Yeah, you might revisit that, I guess. So any decision tonight, or at least seeking approval, I understood the proposal as it relates to the cost of installing a pipe was going to be $3,500, and you're proposing that maybe the town bear that cost, and then the monthly utility bill would, this organization says they will pay that.
They've agreed to pay the
Okay.
monthly utility for the irrigation use.
All right. So what say you, council, on the issue about the $3,500 cost thing? Are you thumbs up on that? Okay, all right, you got that, all right.
All right.
Was there anything else from you, Mr.
That's it for this. I believe
John.
Mr. Hodges has a couple.
Two quick things, if you don't mind. One is a sort of a nuisance issue that may have been something council's noticed, and we just want to let you know the activity we had going on with it. The site on Highway 50 where a Bojangles has been approved, the former Wimpy Williams store, has become a little bit of a truck parking destination. We'd had a phone call from the apartment manager. We've now had a couple of subsequent phone calls from citizens. Just want to let council know that Mr. Bowie has been working on that, was trying to avoid having to do a nuisance letter, has just today made contact with the franchisee of Bojangles that is now the owner of the property. They have become aware of the situation. They have committed to posting the property tomorrow morning. We really can't do anything without it being posted, and then we're limited actually ourselves, but they have committed to posting the property and towing any vehicles that are not authorized to be there. So just want to make you aware that if you've noticed that, we have been working on it and been trying to give a brand new property owner some grace in making sure they're caught up with it, but that contact was made today. Other thing I just wanted to briefly mention, if you did not see it, there was a WRAL story today that was on the evening news, but it posted on the web tonight since we've been here. Mr. Stallings is featured in it, is featuring a number of empty big box stores that have been converting to pharmaceutical or biofarm uses, but the Garner Kmart project is the lead in the story. It mentions a number of others, but if you didn't happen not to see that, just take a look at that on WRAL's website.
Did they give you any idea when they're gonna start the Bojangles building?
Sir, didn't ask, but if Mr. Bowie learned anything, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
There were 6 on it this afternoon.
And this morning, according to a citizen report. So.
Back in and parked nicely, I'll say that.
Were they different company trucks? I mean.
Yes,
Okay.
independent, most time independent.
And they will end up parking somewhere once this is posted. So this is a continual cycle. It's challenging because we need our transportation network. We need a distribution network at a time that our supply chain is challenged. So it's a catch-22. We need the services being provided by most of these trucks and drivers. It's just a challenge of how to help them find appropriate places that don't cause safety. In this case, it's beginning to cause safety concerns because they're parking so close to the road that it's actually causing line of sight issues. So a little bit of a challenge, but if you see things crop up in other locations, we're expecting that, and we'd appreciate just letting us know if you see that starting to happen anywhere.
Okay, was that it, John?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So I'll start this in, Mr. Vance, on council reports.
Yes, I'd like to give an update on the HR committee, Mr. Dillinger and I discussed filling the position for the planning commission. We will be making a recommendation in the very near future, next coming weeks. So that one is moving along steadily. Just wanted to be be aware of that.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, Mr. Dellinger?
Nothing.
Mr. Dell? Okay,
Not to ask twice. Don't ask
Don't ask him
twice.
twice.
yeah, Ms. Behringer?
Okay, yeah, I have a couple of things. The property at the top of the off-ramp onto Jones Sausage Road from 70 East, it looks like they've stopped picking up or trying to pick up any of the trash and garbage. It looks like they've cleared away some brush and are coming in from the side or back of the property. But can we encourage the owner to just please pick the trash up? There's just lots of looks like white bags or white paper just laying around down there.
I came in this morning and they had picked those up that I saw this morning.
What time did you come in? Because I came by there at 9:30 this morning and it was still there.
Okay.
So anyway, you can do that. And there's also a piece of plywood. It looks like it's rotted and fallen out of an opening that it was closing up. We can get that moved. And I had talked with you about dead tree limbs that have fallen out of trees on the edges of properties and stuff. Where are we with that? Because there's the one at the corner of Broughton and West Garner Road, and there's also one right down here. I guess that would be on Aversboro Road. We got the limb cut down that was across Aversboro Road, but there's another one on the backside of it that's still in the right-of-way, I believe.
Yes, I got a list of things to give you an update on, but the tree at Broughton and Avery, we went out and looked at that, actually the inspection staff, and I think it was inspection, not forest. The limbs are falling out the tree, but the tree is still living.
Oh my.
So,
Okay.
It's not a case where we could ask the property owner to cut the tree down because it's not an imminent, for our ordinance, it has to be like an imminent danger of falling.
So just curiosity, what happens if a limb falls on somebody? Because it's very possible, as close as it is to the sidewalk and the right-of-way. So we deal with that if it happens.
Yeah, well, I'll have them take another look at it, but according to them, the tree is still living, so we wouldn't really go out and do anything with it.
And we require the owner to remove the dead limb or branch at the bottom of the tree? No?
I
Okay.
don't. I'll have to confer with the town attorney and look at the ordinance. I don't think we have anything to cover that situation. But they did go out and look at that. Yeah.
That's all.
You good, Ms. Singleton?
Like Duke's gonna beat Clemson by 2 points. There's 1 second left. Had to scroll, it just popped up and scrolled through there, and I tried to find out why. I know why, because Duke shot 13 free throws and Clemson shot 1. I know how they won now. Anyway, no, sir.
Okay, thank you. Phil?
Nothing on my answer.
Okay, thank you. From the mayor's standpoint, this year, I worked with Rick and Kyle to do sort of a state of the town, like through a podcast, or actually sat down with a interview, Garner Station, I guess is what they call it. So I think that was going public today. We took a look at it. It's a little longer maybe than I would have envisioned, but we'll make that available to the public. So if that's something you want to watch in your spare time, it should be available. I think it's YouTube, podcast, and what's the other medium he mentioned? I'm trying to
Well,
remember.
it'll probably be on the web page.
I guess that's right.
You click
yeah.
on the video, yes.
I believe that's right, yeah.
It's on Facebook too.
Yes.
Okay.
Facebook.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, okay. Other than that, that's all I have. Do we have a closed session? Is that right? All right, is council ready to take that on at this time? If so, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's just for the one item, right?
One citation,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, the
Second.
one cited here in the agenda, yeah, okay.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded properly. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm going to declare that we are adjourned.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay, I declare that the council is now back in regular open session, having gone into closed session to discuss possible real estate acquisition in the town's negotiating position, and had discussion with staff regarding options and gave some instructions to staff, but no other formal action was taken. So, council, I believe we have finished our agenda. Are there any last-minute items we need to take care of? If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion properly made and seconded. Any questions? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition, no, and it is so ordered. This council session, work session is now adjourned.